It's always good to be the first person in a room to say good morning. And it is an actual good morning. It's a great morning, and I'm glad to be here. My name is Alex Bird. I am Vice Provost for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Rice University, and one of the organizers of this event, along with Texas Southern University National Alumni Association and the Prairie View A&M National Alumni Association. We are delighted to have you here, those of you who are here in person, and we are delighted to have those of you who are at your desk or at work on Zoom who are also here. I have two jobs today. One is to introduce the president of Rice University at the beginning, and at the end, I'm going to say thank you to all of you again at the very end, and that's my work for today. And so let me get started on my first job. I am delighted that David Lebron, the seventh president of Rice University, is here to kick things off with a welcome. President Lebron has been president at Rice for 18 years. Everything good that has happened at the university over the past 18 years, by definition, happened under his leadership. But when I say that the Juneteenth celebrations here that are 3 years old happened under his leadership, I also mean that in a very particular way, because I remember being in the space. It was a virtual space where he and the provost began a conversation about shouldn't we do something to begin conversation on campus about Juneteenth. And we did it the first 2 years virtually, and this is our first year doing it in person, and it will be our best year. The last thing I want to say about President Lebron that speaks to the theme or the major themes of Juneteenth is his leadership also drove the amazing diversification of our student body here, and has created a potential at Rice that all of us who are members of this community are purposed to draw on to help make this the best university that it can be. Welcome to our Juneteenth conversation on freedom work, and thank you, President Lebron.
Thank you so much, Alex. It is a great morning, although I have to say, in my experience, it's really never great to have to follow Alex Bird. There's something about Alex that conveys a certain spirit and joy, a sense of uplifting that most of us don't have that capability in quite the same way. But I want to thank Alex for many things, and one of them is the privilege of speaking with you very briefly today. I do think this is an important day, or Juneteenth is, in celebration both for our nation, but also for Rice University, and especially being here in Texas. And of course, we celebrate events that took place not very far from where we sit today. And I want to welcome all of you who are here in person and those of you who are online. And of course, I want to acknowledge and thank the participation of Texas Southern University and Prairie View, our partners here in Houston. One of the good things to come out of the last few years is an increasing recognition of the importance and role that our historically Black colleges and universities have played, both in the history of our country and, let's be clear, in the future of our country. So as I thought about Juneteenth, I found it to be a rather distinctive holiday. It looks both back at an important event in our history, and it looks forward to what we still have to do to achieve. Unlike some holidays, it does not celebrate, for example, like July 4th, a mere declaration. That was a declaration of our national independence, but we had no national independence when we made that declaration. Juneteenth elevates action and reality over theory and aspiration. It celebrates the day it was both announced and a reality that all former enslaved people in this country were free. It celebrates the assertion of national authority to achieve that person. And it celebrates in particular the role that the formerly enslaved people, the Black people of America, played in their own liberation. It celebrates both an end and a beginning. And it celebrates not an individual or a limited group of individuals, but it celebrates our realization of an aspiration of freedom and equality very broadly and for all people to the benefit of this nation. It celebrates the freedom of the enslaved peoples, but that was a freedom that many believed then, if not all, and I hope almost all of us believe today, was to benefit the entire nation. We could not be the nation that we wanted to be with that founding deep, deep flaw. The burden, of course, lies on all of us to continue to fully realize the aspirations, those fundamentally flawed aspirations, in a new birth framed by Juneteenth, which sits, interesting enough, between the Emancipation Proclamation, which in a sense was the aspiration and the theory, and the adoption of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. I think that's what makes the celebration, or one of the things that makes the celebration of Juneteenth, perhaps thinking a bit as a lawyer, so important, right? Between that announcement of what the principle would be and implementing into a reality that, of course, wasn't fully realized, but formed the basis of the progress this nation could make. At the beginning, really for only a dozen years or so, as they were followed by the so-called redemption and Jim Crow, which reminded us, as we look back, of the constant need for vigilance and progress. As I said, I want to thank again Texas Southern Prairie View for coming together with Rice on this occasion. And of course, Juneteenth, as I said, must not be only about looking back to the nation's broader history, but also to our own history. And Rice's equivalent in many ways of Juneteenth was not the decision made by the board to admit Black students in 1962, but rather the reality, the first arrival under the aegis of both Rice law and laws approved by the courts in 1965. 1965. Now that followed, of course, our first Black student, Raymond Johnson, who showed, as a graduate student, showed enormous courage in many ways. But one of the ways he showed courage was through his confidence, not only in himself, but by coming here before Black students were actually admitted. It could have happened that he would not have been able to get his degree, but he stepped forward, came here, and then in 1965, the first undergraduates arrived, the kind of, as I said, equivalent of Rice's Juneteenth, under the auspices of the rules of Rice and the rules as determined by the courts. The theme today really reminds us that all of us must participate in this endeavor. I think the importance of making this a national holiday, it is in large part the importance of recognizing the stain of slavery in our nation and the particular burdens that have fallen on Black people in our nation. But when we make it a national holiday, we state, I think clearly, this is a holiday and a celebration and a responsibility for all Americans. We all must be committed to fully realizing the opportunity that Juneteenth created. And it's an important annual reminder, in my view, for all true Americans about where both our responsibilities and our aspirations must lie. And so we must think broadly of the history of our nation and our responsibilities in the country. We must think about our own responsibilities as an institution, a great university in this country, and we must think about our responsibilities as individuals. So I want to conclude by thanking all of you who are here again and participating, both in person and online, and a particular thanks to Alex, who through, how shall I put this? In many ways, the sheer joy of his presence and his clarity in guiding us has brought this university to a better place. And this event here really is part of the work that he has done in his position. So thank you all again for being here. I wish you an extraordinary conversation and celebration today as we all move forward together. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Monique Shankle. I'm the president of the Association of Rice University Alumni. I'm from the class of 1986. And for you Rice alums, I was a member of Hanson College. This first session will cover the theme of recollecting freedom. Our panelists today are Mr. Frank Jackson and Dr. Karen Kossie-Chernyshev. Mr. Frank Jackson is a retired captain with the United States Naval Reserve. He's a former mayor of Prairie View, Texas, and is a retired assistant vice chancellor for state relations in the Texas A&M University system. He is also the author of Juneteenth, Ideas and Consequences. Mr. Jackson obtained a bachelor's degree in geography from Prairie View A&M University and is a member of the Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. He volunteers with the Prairie View Volunteer Firefighting Association Incorporated, where he is the fire chief. Mr. Jackson will be speaking on Juneteenth in the Brazos River Valley, politics, culture, and economy. Karen Kossie-Chernyshev, Ph.D., is a fifth-generation Texan and native Houstonian. She's a three-time graduate of Rice University with the majors of French, English, and history. And she possesses a post-baccalaureate degree from Texas Southern University in music. Dr. Kossie-Chernyshev is the first African-American woman to earn a PhD in the field of history from a Texas institution, and that would be Rice University. Her research focuses on African-American women's intellectual history, African-American religion, and topics in the African diaspora. Her edited works include Recovering 5 Generations Hence, The Life and Writing of Lillian Jones Horace, and Angie Brown, A Jim Crow Romance. Dr. Chernyshev is also the founding director of SWATH. It's an interdisciplinary summer workshop on African-American Texas history for local kindergarten through 16 teachers. This year, she will celebrate 22 years of marriage to Dr. Oleg Chernyshev, who is the director of stroke and sleep at LSU Shreveport. And Dr. Kossie-Chernyshev will be speaking on celebrating freedom through the family history, remembering George and Delia Tyres. I'd like to welcome Mr. Jackson to the stage.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First, giving all praises and honor to God. I'm extremely honored and grateful for this opportunity to be a part of this panel. To the president of this great university, to the mistress of ceremony, to those of you in the audience and those of you online, I bring you greetings from great city of Prairie, Texas, located in the Brazos River Valley. There are those of us who believe that you cannot really get a comprehensive view of Texas history, and in particular, unless you talk about the Brazos River Valley and Prairie View. And I always like to remind audiences that there are two streams of thought that I'll be kind of framing this conversation in. One would be Dr. W.B. Du Bois's Souls of Black Folk, and in particular his chapter on the training of Black men for the world of work, where he said there were three streams of thinking that came down to us from the death ship. So the first thought were the thoughts of the Europeans, that once they had acquired knowledge, that they come to believe that God had so blessed their enterprise that it was their duty to subdue the earth and all men. He said, but behind that thought was a dark and sinister afterthought of force and dominion, the making of black and brown and yellow men to dare from the temptation of beads and red calico with cloy. And the second thought that came down from the death ship were the thoughts of the older South. And we know here in Texas, we're just as much a part of Dixie as Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana. He said the older South fervently and passionately believed that somewhere between man and cattle, God created this tertium quid, this intermediate thing, and called it a Negro, a simple clownish creature, yet lovable within its limitations. But Du Bois said behind that thought was a dark afterthought that the older South also knew that perhaps by chance, some of them may become living men and women. Some of them may learn to use their intellect. So out of pure self-defense, they say we dare not let them. So they decided to build around us a wall so wide and place between us and any knowledge a veil so thick that we would not even think of breaking through. And the third and the darkest thoughts were the thoughts of the things themselves. Say you'd ask the average Negro back in 1901, what do you want? They'll say, vouchsafe for us, O votes for world, the chances of living men, freedom, opportunity, equality. He said, but behind that thought was the afterthought that after all those hundreds of years of bondage, even the Negro had come to believe that perhaps the world is right. Perhaps we are not like other men. There's some margmarage from the untrue. You see, when you go back and look at Texas history and look at that Brazos River Valley, that's the home of Stephen F. Austin's headquarters, San Felipe de Austin. Austin came into Texas and he had to lobby the Mexican government because this was part of Mexico to allow him to bring in Negro slaves. And he gave an incentive to his old 300, the original 300 settlers that came in from the older South looking for land to grow cotton. He said, for each Negro you bring into Texas, he would give him an additional 80 acres of land. A rich planter out of Alabama named Jarvis Ellison Gross brought in, some say 90, some of his family members say 110 enslaved African men, women, and children. He walked them from as far away as his plantation in Alabama into the Brazos River Valley. And all total, old man Gross got 44,000 acres of land. His son, Leonard Waller Gross, received 66,000 acres of land. He owned Leendo Plantation, which is 2 miles from Prairie View. So you can see this Brazos River Valley became the seat of this power base from a family. Prairie View is located on the Alta Vista Plantation, which was purchased as a wedding gift for Helen Moore Swearingen, and up on the occasion of her marriage to Jarvis Ellison Kirby, Gross's great nephew. And so you can see this family dynasty. When the Alamo fell and Sam Houston was running, it was Sam Houston that ran to the Brazos River and crossed the Brazos River at Gross's ferry. Gross was the one that brought him into Texas on the urging of his son-in-law, one of the Warden boys that married Gross's daughter, Sarah Ann. They had the Eagle Island plantation where they grew sugar. But this cotton and sugar that they were growing in that valley helped produce Houston and Galveston. Edwin Waller was chosen by the president of the Republic of Texas, Marbu Lamar, to locate the new capital of the Republic. He chose the site of Austin and became the first mayor of Austin. So you can kind of see this power base from this family. But after the Civil War, the question became, what do you now do with these newly freed Negroes? You see, we celebrate Juneteenth as the day the Union General Gordon Granger landed at Galveston Island and read Journal Order No. 3 and brought word of the Emancipation Proclamation that was passed 2.5 years earlier on 1 January 1863, but word didn't get up to Waller County till August the 25th, when George Armstrong Custer and several hundred cavalry troops rode into Hempstead. And we kept asking, why did Custer come to Waller County? He came to Waller County because as the Confederate command started to fall, One of the last major commands was the Trans-Mississippi Command, headed by a 3-star general named Edmund Kirby Smith. Edmund Kirby Smith's headquarters was at his cousin's plantation called Alta Vista. So Prairie View is probably the last site of a major Confederate command. And so they was trying to catch Kirby Smith. He hightailed it into Mexico. And eventually he's the one that signed the Canby-Buckner Agreement, formally ending the war. But after the war, the Northern businessmen who were the real winners of the Civil War, they had to ask the question, how do we re-engineer the South? There was mostly agriculture-based economy. How do we re-engineer it to answer the dictates of this new industrial economy that was in the North? And they decided that they would use education as their technique for social control. They would do it through the minds of the children. And so they hired the president of Brown University, Barnard Sears, as their agent. He came into the South and he lobbied the Texas government, legislature rather, to create these schools. But see, that was a sort of a problem, because in that Brazos River Valley, down on the Mount Zion Sunnyside plantation, there was a Black man born named Norris Wright Cuney. Cuney's father was Philip Cuney, former slave master. And his slave master was married twice, but he had a slave mistress named Adeline Stewart. He had several babies by that lady. She convinced him to send the girls to France to get educated and send the boys back east to the Wild Street School for Negroes in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Young Norris Wright Cuney came back into Texas. After the Civil War, he was educated, he was a mulatto, and he started exercising leadership, became the first Grand Master of Prince Hall Masons in Texas. He started organizing Blacks during that Reconstruction era to run for public office. So we had William Holland, who was state rep out of Hempstead. We had George Wyatt. We had Walter Burton, who was a state senator down in Fort Bend County. We had Matthew Gaines over in Washington County. So it would be these gentlemen in Austin that would be the ones that would sound the banner, carry the banner for Black education in the South, because the Southern aristocracy and the Northern businessmen had gotten together to form a scheme on how they was gonna raise us up just one level to be wage earners and not really use our intellect, because Cuney and his boys had started formally getting Blacks organized. Cuney became the head of the Republican Party in Texas. See, back then, most African Americans were Republicans. The Democrats were our blood enemies. And so Cuney started organizing. Eventually, they start really watching and getting businesses started. People weren't laying around being lazy and shiftless. They were organizing. And so Cuney, his father, Philip Cuney, had taken him to Galveston and showed him how that cotton and sugar was going into Galveston. That was really how you kind of get control of the economy. So he mastered the politics. He was working on the economy, became a threat. And some of us believe that the Southern aristocracy, wait a minute, we got to stop. They have to shut Cuney down. And we start seeing once Richard Koch and those boys got back in power, they started organizing and they started running Cuney out of office. And we started seeing the Black codes as separate but equal. They started dropping that veil around us one more time. In 1876, when the legislative session convened, they created A&M College for white males only. Texas A&M remained for white males only from 1876 up until around 1962. And because you had William Holland and Matthew Gaines in the Texas legislature during that era, they called it Tech. And so William Holland became known as the father of Prairie View because he got them to come back in special session on August 14th and create A&M College for colored youth. And the governor, Richard Koch, wrote a letter to Jefferson Davis, the former president of the Confederacy, and invited him to come into Texas and be the first president of both A&M and Prairie View. And Jefferson Davis declined, but he said, I'm gonna send you a man out of Mississippi. He sent Thomas Garthright, which was a past Grand Master of Masonic Lodge of Mississippi. And he told him to bring a colored man to be the principal out at Prairie View. He brought L.W. Minor, and L.W. Minor streets run through the campus. So we got to see that the old guard stayed in charge. They stayed very active to make sure that that competition was limited. Cuney's boys eventually opened up a bank called the Fraternal Bank and Trust in Fort Worth, ran by his Grand Secretary, William Bill Gooseneck McDonald. And this now brought in an era when white supremacy all over the globe was really getting organized. They were carving up Africa in the 1880s. And then in the 1890s, they started having these conferences that Dr. J.D. Anderson from Michigan called at Capon Springs. They had a great conference where the president of Hampton University, Hollis came forth and said that the best thing that happened in the South was the Negro and the mule, and it'd be a shame to ruin a good field hand by giving them Latin and arithmetic and all this stuff. That's where Booker T was trained at Hampton. He went down to Tuskegee. You look at his board of directors, the same Northern capitalists, George Foster Peabody, William H. Baldwin, railroad tycoons. They made sure that they had in place in power the policies to shut us down. At the one conference they had at Cape Palm Springs, a young Rockefeller showed up. He was so impressed, he went home and told his daddy what he had heard at this conference. And from 1901 to 1922, old man Rockefeller contributed 129 million of his money to the venture. And we started seeing that guys like Julius Rosenwald started creating those Rosenwald schools. They were shaping this Black culture. And so a lot of us was born into this venture and really didn't know what was happening to us. So I think Juneteenth ushered in a new era where there was competition, but that competition had to be channeled, had to be put in its bounds. And we now stand at the threshold of a new day. So my time is up and I'll be standing by for questions and answers. Thank you.
That was wonderful. He provided what we call history from the top down, and I'm going to provide some history from the bottom up. Celebrating freedom through family history, the case of George and Delia Tyres. From my earliest days at home and Sunday school, which were often one and the same at my father's house as he was a pastor, the significance of history was interwoven into all aspects of life. History was instructive and essential. It provided context and a meaningful way to understand the past, its influence on the present, and implications for the future. As my father responded to his calling to establish a church that is still thriving in Houston's historic Fifth Ward, the birthplace of such Texas originals as Barbara Jordan, Mickey Leland, Ruth Simmons, he often described the experience as a kind of tug of war between him and God, with God telling him, son, you can't tell your story about how this work, meaning the church, is being developed. I'm telling mine. As a little girl who loved stories, I decided to wait around to watch the drama. The story my father told eventually became the foundation for my Ph.D. dissertation at Rice University. Not long before my father passed, I asked him a favor that I knew he would find irresistible despite his weakened physical state. I said, Dad, will you pray with me about a history project I'm working on? He waited for a moment and then stated, your roots are very deep. I presumed he was referring to my longstanding commitment to Texas Southern University, where I've been laboring in the groves of academia for almost 30 years. Not long after he passed away, I realized he was referring to what I would soon learn about my family's historical connection to Texas history just a few days before my birthday, thanks to a timely email from Ancestry.com. A transcription of my paternal great-grandmother's death certificate. Delia Shields Tyres, born September 15th, 1870. She died May 2nd, 1928. Her age at the time of death, 57, caught my attention. Inspired by the document, I set out to trace my family's genealogy to the period of slavery as a birthday present to myself. I found an answer that left me speechless and brimming with gratitude. More than 300 documents affirmed my family's undeniable presence in Texas, from Mexican Texas history to the present. Slavery, freedom, the Dawes Act, Jim Crow, World Wars I and II and beyond were all evident in the records. I learned that my Grandma Delia's parents were William Dick Shields, born in 1841. His death is unknown. And Adeline Richardson Shields, born in 1848. She died in 1919. I also learned that Adeline Richardson Shields attempted to take advantage of the Dawes Act to claim Cherokee ancestry and the land that came with it, but her application was denied in 1896. A century later, DNA testing by her descendants corroborated Adeline Shields' claim. Adeline and her husband migrated to Texas from Tennessee, more than likely with the old 300 that our first speaker referred to, the group of white settlers who petitioned the Mexican government to bring their slaves with them to work the land. As slavery was forbidden in Mexico, slave owners found loopholes to continue exploiting their slaves. They called them indentured servants, farmers, housekeepers, in lieu of their designation as enslaved. Notwithstanding their life in bondage, the 1880 census affirms that all of George Shields and Adeline Richardson Shields' children were born free after the Emancipation Proclamation was signed into law, after General Granger read General Order 3, the Juneteenth document. Their names were Robert, he was 12 at the time, Adam, 10, Delia, 8, Caroline, 6, John, 4, George, 1, and John, born later in 1889. On December 31st, 1899, Delia Shields married George Tyres in Wharton County, Texas, and the couple moved to Houston between 1900 and 1906. Although they were free, their lives and those of their siblings and children bore witness to Jim Crow and the limited educational and professional opportunities that came with it. Yet they worked their freedom. Delia was described as a domestic, and her husband, George Tyres, a common laborer on one record, and a machinist at Lucy Manufacturing Company on another. John, Delia's younger brother, though a man at the time of the 1930 census, was described as an elevator boy. George Tyres took advantage of his right to own property, one of the most vital rights afforded African Americans in the aftermath of slavery. He owned several acres of land in Ryan's Addition, fertile soil that remained in the family's possession for approximately 100 years until the city of Houston seized the land through eminent domain. When George Tyres acquired the property, and from whom has yet to be determined, longtime residents and Galilee Baptist Church were displaced. So too was Elysian Products, an historic concrete business established on the family homestead by George Tyres' grandson, Carl Otis DeWalt, born February 27th, 1928. He died January 13th, 2020. One of Houston's earliest Black businessmen and the maternal grandfather of Jalen Hurts, current quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. The freeway that was planned was never constructed, yet the tree that my great-grandfather planted still remains. Great-grandma Delia's death certificate led me for the first time in my life to her final resting place, Evergreen Negro Cemetery, which the Texas Historical Commission designated as a historic Texas cemetery in 2009. I had no idea I had driven past or even over her grave countless times on my way to Texas Southern University. Nor did I realize her husband, George Tyres, my great-grandfather, was also buried there. This discovery came later. With the help of my husband and son, I walked through Evergreen looking for a headstone that bore Grandma Delia's name. I also met Woodrow W. Wilson, who was granted trusteeship to take care of the cemetery. He informed me that Evergreen Negro Cemetery was established by Alexander K. Kelly, an African-American former slave and philanthropist who wanted to ensure that African-American Houstonians had a dignified final resting place. I learned further that 461 bodies had been exhumed to make room for Lockwood Drive, which was paved in the 1950s. The same decade, the highway system sliced and diced Houston's historic Fifth Ward community, where my free ancestors chose to settle. I was saddened that my great-grandmother's grave might have figured among those that were exhumed, but I was very grateful that I had a record affirming her physical location and ties to Houston's and Texas's history from the state's earliest days. I learned that all of my ancestors who died during the Jim Crow era were buried in African-American cemeteries throughout the Houston area, including Evergreen, College Park, Golden Gate, where the late Congressman Mickey Leland and African-American Houstonians from every social stratum were interred. Their death certificates also reveal the names of the Black-owned funeral homes that prepared their bodies for interment, including Clay and Clay, Sacred Hope, Cashmere Garden Funeral Home, and Lewis. All but Lewis Funeral Home are still located in Houston's historic Fifth Ward and Greater Fifth Ward regions. They and some of their descendants were eulogized in historic African-American churches in the area, including Latter-day Deliverance Revival Church, founded in 1966 by George and Delia Tyres' grandson and his wife, my parents. Thanks to my great-grandparents' death certificates, I have a fuller picture of who I am and where my paternal grandmother and grandfather's families came from. Their documents, as well as their possibly displaced remains, are material evidence that my family's history is interwoven with that of the city and state, a history that can never be denied. For George and Delia Tyres set into motion a birth of more than 100 Texans and counting, beginning with Willie Mae Tyres and her fruitful younger sister, Millie Ann Tyres DeWalt Kossie, who bore 7 children, most of whom raised families of their own in the area. Thanks to social change and freedom work, her descendants have pursued college degrees at HBCUs and PWIs throughout the state of Texas, including Prairie View A&M, Jarvis Christian College, Texas Southern University, Rice University, the University of Texas, Texas A&M, University of Houston, Dallas Baptist, Stephen F. Austin, Houston Community College, San Jacinto College. They have served as members of the armed forces, as administrators, college and professional athletes, barbers, businessmen, managers, mavericks, musicians, nurses, policemen, preachers, principals, professional chefs, teachers, and college professors, including Dr. Patrick DeWalt, who teaches at Fresno State University, and myself at Texas Southern. It is encouraging to know that through faith, hope, and perseverance, George and Delia Shields Tyres and their descendants defied the odds. They managed to survive, live, strive, and thrive in Houston's Greater Fifth Ward region, one saturated with African-American Texas history. Thanks to their records and those of other relatives, I can rest knowing that no piece of legislation can ever negate our family's history. What is certain is that freedom was key. Freedom locally, regionally, nationally, and globally. As record spanning 140 years and 7 generations confirms, freedom requires work on multiple fronts, social, political, and economic. But what our history also does show is that freedom really does work. Thank you. So this is just a picture of the tree that's still over there on Evelyn and Murray that my great-grandfather planted. I really want to approach the city of Houston and ask if I could put a plaque on it. This is a picture of Delia Shields Tyres to the right and George Tyres. And you've already seen the picture of her. This is the information I got from Ancestry.com. And here is that indication, that 1% that I have of Native American ancestry that Delia tried to claim to get some land. That didn't work, but we're okay. Thank God for freedom work, and thank God that freedom works.
Thank you. Okay, now we'd like to open up for questions. We have 2 mics here. So if you would go to either one of the mics, we'll take questions for our panelists.
So we'll get us started with a question from one of our online viewers, and there are 103 people out there. So but I think we could take them if we had to. Those of us who are here. But the first question comes from Jovanta Mason, who is a graduate of Prairie View A&M University from 2017 and 2019, and her question is for Mayor Jackson. Jovanta appreciates the attention that you gave to the men and women who go on to advocate for Black education following the Civil War. Jovanta would like to know more about any records that you have come across that, or could direct her to, that speak to the enslaved people who were brought to the Brazos River Valley to those specific plantations that you mentioned, Mayor Jackson.
Yes, thank you for that question. There are several documents. One I would refer to be the history of Waller County. And that history book was a collaboration of the Waller Historical Commission and one of our own educators, that's history professor emeritus, Dr. George Rubel Woolfolk, helped write that book. And then the other book I would recommend would be the Old 300. In there, they document the first 300 settlers that were invited to come into Texas by Austin and receive massive acreages of land across the South, especially in the Brazos River Valley and over to the East Texas. So I would start there. And then there are other family history records that she can access. There's a lot of work being done now on Gross's plantation there, which is what was formerly part of Hempstead, going south along the Brazos, and then even down in the Wharton County, where his daughter Sarah Ann ran the Eagle Island plantation. And there's a book on the plantations in Texas that talks about those plantations and the plantation life. So from that, she can start getting the names of the former slave owners, and then kind of drill down and get the names of those that were part of the 1850 census records, and then try to go from there. But it can be done.
Thank you. I didn't make clear that I was asking the first question to give y'all time to line up to ask your questions. I want to apologize for that, but I'm gonna do it one more time so people can start lining up in the aisles. My second question is for Dr. Kossie-Chernyshev, and it has to do with the sources of history that are all around us. You do a splendid job of calling our attention to the usefulness of the built and natural environment around us as sources for history, Black cemeteries and even trees. What other things should we be paying attention to as important pathways into the African-American past?
I'd say people, your relatives. One of the exercises that my students always love is when I have them interview the oldest living relative in their family. And they are often fascinated by what they find, because, you know, we're who we are, but it's not that we sit around and, you know, talk historically about who we are. One of my students, for example, last semester found out that her great-great-grandmother had been a slave for Andrew Jackson. Okay. Another found out reasons why her family migrated out of the South to the Chicago region, you know. And so the feedback that I got made me realize that there needs to be a deliberate effort to talk to family members. We heard a lot at home all the time because, you know, my dad was a preacher. Preachers like to talk. And they love telling stories. So they love telling stories. And so it's about storytelling and storytelling with a purpose. So people would be the first resource. The other is a lot of times people don't think about places. Thanks to the internet, another exercise that I would have students, I had students do in one class, because they were in all these various zip codes. I had them researching the zip code they were in, for demographic information by using the US Census, typing in the zip code. They found out that their communities were more diverse than they thought. So I might ask a question like, why are you more likely to find a Timmy Chan's in 77026 than in, 77019, a particular kind of restaurant? So some of them would find out that their communities were more diverse than they presumed. They also, another goal was for them to identify historic buildings in the zip code that they were in. And in the African-American community, historic churches, historic homes in some cases, just the history around them. So when you start layering it and also making them, of course, aware of the different repositories, looking at laws that are governing a different place, a particular state. So there's all the traditional stuff that we know to look at as historians. We know to look at census records. We know to look at state laws, because laws are shaping how people behave. But then there are those other things like letters that we might write to others that are still somewhere tucked away. Programs from funerals have information on them. And so the training of the training to become a professional historian teaches you how to contextualize all of that, teaches you what to do with it. And so that's the other thing, learn history, learn how to do history.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll have a question from this gentleman.
Okay, there's a concern about Fifth Ward, which is where my mother's family is from. Polly Rockmore was a midwife, and she had the city of Houston has a record of all the babies that she brought into the world. And they have a file just like they have for the medical doctors in the city records. One question that I have is how do you go about trying to find the history of Polly Rockmore? And for instance, her daughter, Barbara Williams, graduated in the first nursing class from Prairie. And as you know, this is the 100-year celebration of that. Her daughter, Hortense Dixon, was vice president at Texas Southern University. And there's a lot of family history that's tied in there. And I think that I'm interested in writing a book about family history and trying to tie some of these things together. One question for Frank Jackson would be, there's some story about the strategy on the plantations when a slave tried to escape, and they would punish them by trading them away to the next plantation. And the story that these slaves would, they would run all night to go back and visit their families and then back to the plantation the next day. So just a few things for thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Kossie-Chernyshev, would you like to respond to this gentleman?
As I mentioned before, learning how to contextualize the data that you have. With history, we're trying to tell a story. And we also have to be guided by the facts we have. So once you've gathered all of the factual information you have, you kind of look at it and ask, what story do I have here? Am I telling a story of triumph over adversity? Is there a particular moment in my family's history where there was something that was happening that was particularly important? Or do I want to start by having just a biographical sketch written on each of the family members like you pretty much did orally today? So, you know, there are different ways to get at your family's history. And one of the ways that when we're dealing with people that we start is with a biographical sketch. So just putting that down on paper.
And I believe the Houston Public Library also has classes in their genealogy department that's available for free for the citizens to take. So you might want to contact the Houston Public Library, and I think they can help with that too, and possibly direct you to other resources. Okay, I'm going to go to this lady because I think she was next, and then we'll go over there. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you both for your excellent presentations. I appreciate that. The question that I have, and I'm kind of pondering about, is that, and looking to the future, and us telling our stories, how do you see critical race theory impacting that, particularly as we're talking about younger students, younger children being open and willing to ask and have a conversation with their older relatives? I can remember growing up and asking my aunt, my dad's aunt, about how was it when you were growing up? She didn't want to talk about it. She said it was so bad. You won't experience that in life. Little did she know. But so critical race theory impact that? How do y'all see that impacting the future and going forward and us really getting our stories out there? Thank you.
Well, I would like to first address the question that was raised by Mr. Brown on strategies. One of the main strategies they used was to deny us education. If they caught African-American on their plantation reading or writing, they would whip us and tie us to whipping posts and beat us. And if it was a woman, sometimes and she was pregnant, they'd make her abort the child and crush it because there was no feeling for us being human. That's why Du Bois said it was this intermediate thing. And once that gets in the culture, it's hard to change that. Culture change is slow. You can change public policy. And that's what critical race theory, the way I understand it, deals with. It drills down and look at policy and see how that policy really reflects racial attitudes. And we see that all the time, just like with Prairie, you know, if you looked at it from a policy position, it's one of the 3 universities of the first class in Texas, Texas A&M, University of Texas, and Prairie View. But then you look at it and you drill down, you say, wait a minute, why doesn't it look like the other 2? What is the funding distribution? And it's like, well, why aren't we equal? And they say, well, that's not really a good idea. It's absurd to think that. And say, no, why can't I think about us being equal? Or you look at the city of Prairie View and versus A&M. Or you say, well, that's different. Well, we got to address that because when you look at the city of Prairie View, you still don't see banks and grocery stores and bookstores. You say, what's wrong with this picture? But if you look at it before integration, after integration, I was sharing earlier with a gentleman here in the auditorium before we started about my hometown of Luling. I went back to look at the school system in Luling before integration and found out that the records that came from the Rosenwald School to the white school, Luling High, all of our records were taken to the city dump and burned because they put them in the old building and the mice got on them and mold. So there's no record. Now, if you graduated from Rosenwald High School prior to 1965, you can't prove it. So it's like this gap. And they only hired 3 teachers, all women, 2 in the lower grades, 1 in high school with home economics. So there was no male leadership. The city of Lockhart, which is the county seat, they had no African-American teachers. So this policy development is what I think CRT looks at. And there's a move afoot now by the legislature to say, well, they want to address that during the legislative session and maybe outlaw it and pull the books off the shelf and all this kind of stuff, because we got to get into truth telling. And that's why I kind of digress and go all the way back to Austin, because Stephen F. Austin was not only the father of Texas, he's the father of slavery in Texas. He did it. He brought him in here and told me give him an extra 80 acres of land. So when we started looking at that, he said, wait a minute, why shouldn't we get a piece of that land? You know, so when you start really drilling down and asking those tough questions, somebody's got to address that. Even with CUNY, we now believe now that the reason for all those Jim Crow acts was to shut us down, because CUNY and his folks were getting political power. CUNY political payoff was get control of the docks in Galveston. That's where the sugar and the cotton coming out of that Brazos River Valley that was driving Texas. And we know sugar was the big driver early on until cotton started really taking hold. So Queen Sugar and King Cotton. And if you got an African-American man now telling who unload the ships, move the cargo, they had to shut that down, because in capitalism, it's about controlling competition. And so our whole cultural environment, like Dr. Woolfolk said in his book entitled Prairie, A Study in Public Conscience, says when you are dominated politically and economically, your whole culture will be shaped. And it's shaped in such a way that the veil that the both talked about, I'm speaking to you in English. I'm not an Englishman. We came mostly from West Africa, Ibu, Fulani, Ashanti, Hausa, Yoruba, Mandinka. We had our own gods, Olodumare, Mbiliange, Wiri, Ogun, gone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, we want to hear from our next person.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Dwayne Johnson. I am a graduate of Prairie View A&M University. I a former radio personality at KPVU. I have the pleasure of knowing Mayor Frank Jackson. My question is mainly to Professor Dr. Karen Kossie. Forgive me, I can't pronounce your last name. But however, I saw that you did a lot of studies and a lot of research on Ancestry.com. And you brought up a very interesting point that I think we should talk about during Juneteenth, is the Aboriginal movement. You showed that 1% of Native American indigenous that they will show, it showed on my ancestry DNA as well. But we had old grandmothers and people that said, oh, we got Indian in the family, you know what I mean? Indian is Indian. And so technically we wasn't Indian like Mayor Frank Jackson said, but like Malcolm X said, Plymouth Rock landed on us, and Dr. Martin Luther King said that the Black man is held exiled in his own land. So because of that, I have been doing research, and I've been thinking, well, maybe we were here before the narrative of slavery was told, before the West Africans were brought in here. Now there's a doll's roll and a trail of tears. How do I find these people, these lost tribes of the Crow, the Blackfoot, and things that's been told that's been in my family for decades, and I'm coming across some brick walls. So would you or the panel kind of direct me into kind of tearing down that brick wall and finding these engines in the family?
Well, first, accept that the brick walls are there, but sometimes there are cracks in them. And so part of it is looking for the cracks and honestly, consistently trying to find and use what you can. But doing background reading is very important. Just taking the time like you've done to think broadly, and you kind of start broadly reading, and then you get down to the specifics of whatever the topic is, and you try to see how your family story interrelates or intertwines with these various stories. So yeah, part of your, some of your ancestry was here before Columbus. But there, records have been lost for so many people, not just people of African descent. And it's not to minimize that, but it is to say that there's still plenty of information out there. Part of it is knowing how to access it, knowing how to look, knowing which questions to ask as you're doing, and then taking advantage of repositories of history and also public history, going to the museums that are available to you. And this gets back to the question about critical race theory. I do history, so I'm knowing that if you're looking at documents and things that you can actually look at and analyze, all of that's important. So looking at what you can find in museums, what you can find, of course, in libraries. Again, people resources are very important. Through presentations that I've given, I've had people ask questions that led me to something that I didn't think about before. There are also organizations that celebrate African-American history throughout the city, Shape Community Center and others. So many of them have summer programs where you can take your children and grandchildren so they learn more about themselves. So taking that time. The other part is, I wanted to mention that the organization I started, SWAT, last year, and I can give it to you after the conference, we had a 3-day conference where we talked about critical race theory and its relationship to the teaching of history in general. And those videos are online. So I can give you the link to those videos, the woman who asked later. Mm-hmm. Right.
Thank you very much. We have one last question.
Good morning. My name is Melanie Bess. I'm a Rice alum, 2000 from Jones College. Thank you guys for sharing your story this morning. It has been an encouragement and a refreshment for me and my husband who've been viewing online. And so I asked him if he had a question, and he does. And Dr. Kossie-Chernyshev, love what you said, and we're trying to figure out if there's connections with the Shields family, so we'll let you know. But his question was for former Mayor Jackson. My husband has found connection with the original 300 and the slave that was brought from Missouri into Texas in the Waller County area. And he wanted to know, is there a connection with old slaves of 300? Is there a group? We are familiar that there is an original 300 group, kind of similar to the Daughters of the Revolution, but do you know if there are original 300 slaves that have gathered together to form a group?
I'm not sure about the original 300 slaves together, but each Friday morning, the World Conference of Mayors and the Historical Black Towns and Settlements Alliance, with our president, former Mayor Johnny Ford out of Tuskegee, we meet every Friday morning at 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock and discuss these issues. So I'll be glad to share that with you. And we look at all those historical Black towns and settlements across the South, starting over in Edenville, Florida, to Grambling, to Hobson City, to Edenville, coming across up to Prairie View, Kelton, then going on up into Oklahoma, and the 5 cities, the historical Black towns and settlements there, and then on up into Kansas. So we've been on this for a while. So, and I think that also addressed his question about how to connect. And we also have the First Peoples that are part of that conversation. So the so-called Native Americans, they're in this conversation. There's a gentleman named Herschel Daniels that is a representative to the United Nations that's been pulling these documents together. And the big tie that binds is Andrew Jackson, because it's his Lieutenant Sam Houston and Gross. So when you look at Gross, this was part of that conspiracy to overthrow the government. And the only thing that was in their way was the Mexican president, the second president of the Republic of Mexico, Vicente Guerrero. And then he ended up assassinated.
Okay, thank you very much.
Wake up, everybody. Wake up, everybody. No more sleeping in bed. No more backwards thinking. Time for thinking ahead. The world has changed so very much from what it used to be. There is so much hatred, war, and poverty. Wake up all the teachers. Teach them a new way. Maybe then they'll start listening to what you have to say. 'Cause there's one who's coming up and the world is in their hand. When you teach the children, teach them the very best that you can. The world won't get no better if we just let it be. The world won't get better, no better than we. Gotta change it, yeah. Just you and me. Wake up all the doctors. Make the old people well. They are the ones who suffer and catch all the hell. But they don't have so very long before the judgment day. So what you make them happy before they pass away. Wake up all the builders. Time to build a new land. I know we can do it better if we lend a hand. The only thing we have to do is put in our minds, surely things will work out. Then do it every time. That was Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes from 1975. Dr. Gregory Maddox, Texas Southern University, assistant professor from 1988 to 1994, associate professor from 1994 to 2001, and currently professor from 2001 to the present. University of Dar es Salaam, Tanzania Fulbright Senior Scholar from 1993 to 1994. Dr. Gregory Maddox was educated at the University of Virginia, receiving his Bachelor of Arts in 1982, and he received his Ph.D. from Northwestern University in 1988. Dr. Maddox also has many books under his name: translator and editor, The Go, History, Customs and Traditions, Practicing History in Central Tanzania, Writing Memory and Performance with Ernest M. Congo, with the IN Cambodia and Salvary, A New History of Tanzania. University service, Director of Internal Programs from 2013 to the present. Dean of the Graduate School at Texas Southern University from 2007 to the present. Accreditation Liaison to the Commission of College and Southern Association of Colleagues and Schools, September 1st, 2007 to the present. And his professional service, Associate Editor, Environmental History from 1996 to 2001, Editorial Board from 2001 to 2011, Editorial Board Tanzania, the Journal of the Historic Association of Tanzania, and Editorial Board, the Oxford Research Encyclopedia of African History. That is the biography of Dr. Maddox, Gregory Maddox. Melanie Price, Dr. Melanie Price, is an endowed professor of political science at the Prairie View A&M University and director of the Ruth J. Center for Race and Justice. Her research interests include Black politics, public opinion, political rhetoric, and social movement. Her most recent book, The Race Whisperer, Barack Obama and the Political Uses of Race at NYU in 2016, examines the multitude and strategic ways that President Obama uses race to deflect negative racial attitudes and engage with a large cross-section of voters. Her first book, Dreaming Blackness, Black Nationalism and African-American Public Opinion at NYU in 2009. Examining support for Black nationalism. Her new project is called Mountaintop Removal, Martin Luther King, Trump, and Racial Mountain, which uses MLK's mountaintop speech as the lens for understanding the rise of Trump and the 2016 election. Dr. Price completed her BA magna cum laude in geography at the Prairie View A&M University, and her MA and PhD in political science at the Ohio State University. Before coming to Prairie View, she was Associated Professor of African Studies and Political Science at Rutgers University, New Brunswick. Professor Price previously taught at Wesleyan University and was an inaugural professor for Wesleyan College in prison program correction facility, a maximum security men's prison. She was also the 2017 Black History Month lecturer for the U.S. Embassy in Germany, where she lectured at universities and community organizations in Frankfurt, Berlin. Professor Price did election commentary for the 2016 election session on Philadelphia's NBC 10. She was also one of the contributors to Stanley Nestle's documentary, Obama, Through the Fire, which aired on BET. She was also done political for the New York Times, Ms. Magazine Hartford, Fox, and New York and CT Public radio station. She is also a frequent guest host of Houston's public radio station, I See You. Dr. Melanie Price. And last, we have Dr. Cindy. Inja Daka Cindy, I know I just butchered that, is a PhD candidate in the Department of Chemical Engineering at Rice University, here at Rice University. She earned her Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from Arizona State University. Her current work, entitled Synthesis for Implementation in Water Treatment and Purification Systems, in Dr. Raphael's group. Alongside her doctorate research, Cindy is a noted campus leader and a serves as the president of Rice Black Graduate Student Association, BGSA, during the 2001-2002 academic year. We would like to welcome all of our doctors here. And now I turn the floor over to Dr. Maddox. Hear ye him.
Thank you so much, Ms. Waits. I will admit, I'm a little intimidated standing up here right now. There's an awful lot of purple out in that crowd. Not a whole lot of maroon and gray. So yes, I'm Greg Maddox. I am, well, you know, you heard the things, but I'm here because I am Dean of the Graduate School at Texas Southern University, a position I've held for the last 15 years. And before anybody says anything, that's a long time. I've been for the last 5 trying to quit. And they keep saying, one more year. Come on. And so what we're on this panel, we're going to talk a little bit about African-American engagement with graduate education, in particular, thinking about what are the pathways and what are the barriers to African Americans receiving doctorates, becoming part of the professorate, as we call it. And, you know, in one sense, my position has afforded me a real close-up look at this. We have at TSU 27 master's programs and 7 doctorates that fall under the graduate school. We generally have about 1,000 graduate students spread across all of those programs. And in another sense, though, looking at it, in some ways, that question is not one the graduate school at TSU actually answers, right? That's the question that research universities have to answer, institutions like Rice University. Because when they talk about pathways to the doctorate, they're not quite talking about the same pathways that our students take to go to the doctorate. I won't speak for Prairie View, but I would imagine it wouldn't surprise me if it wasn't similar in some cases, some senses. This research institution pathway to the doctorate is one that is profoundly individual and alienating, even in the sciences where you're working in teams from the beginning. And it's certainly the case in the humanities and social sciences where you're very much an individual, scholar working on your own work. That pathway into the research university is one where people have to leave. My colleague, Dr. Kossie-Chernyshev, is unique in that she has her undergraduate and doctorate from the same institution, but even in her case, I happen to know this because she's been my colleague for a while. Even in her case, she has a master's degree from Michigan State University. So like almost anyone who gets into this world, you do it by going off, going to the school that has the program you want. You know, I am originally from Alabama. I got to Houston via Virginia, Chicago, and East Africa, you know, and that was, you know, to do what I wanted to do, that was what I had to do. And I, you know, happy to do it. What I found working in graduate education for the last 15 years at Texas Southern is that is not who most of our graduate students are. It says nothing about their ability, their thought, their skills, but they are not people that can pack up and, you know, move off to, well, we just had one of our PhD students got a postdoc at Harvard, move off to Cambridge, you know, at the drop of a hat. They are people that come out of a community, out of Houston, out of Texas for the most part. Many of them are, I'm going to use this term, and I don't mean it to be derogatory because it's not, because this is what our mission is. They are vocational, right? They're getting a graduate degree because they need it to help them advance in their careers. And at TSU, talking about how we then think about transitioning the students that we have with all their skills, all their enthusiasm into, you know, this sort of very alienating professorate type world is a very hard thing to do. People can't and don't want to leave the community, to leave home. What they want, in many cases, is to be able to get the types of skills and training that they, you know, that will help them achieve their dreams intellectually as well as professionally, in a place where they, you know, where they are. It's not just a matter of comfort, it's a matter of responsibility in many cases, you know. And so what we do at TSU is, in the limited way that we can, we try to make that possible. We make it possible both for, you know, for some of our students, particularly our master's level students, and we have a full range of master's degrees that we offer, to transition to doctoral programs at other institutions. I know Dr. Kossie-Chernyshev was first African-American woman to receive a PhD in history from in Texas. Well, a few years later, there were at least 4 African-American women in PhD programs across the state and across the country from TSU. They were master's students. And that is something that we consistently do. And again, across our disciplines is, you know, we help with the transition here. And, you know, we're in a unique way positioned to do this to some extent, because at a research institution, a master's degree in history means you flunked out. There's nothing like, I mean, many of them, it's not entirely true, but many of them, it's, you know, that is that you're into the PhD program, and if they flunk you out, they give you a master's degree, you know? Whereas for us, we, you know, for our master's degrees, these are primary credentials for us. I mean, you'd be surprised at how many community college and secondary school teachers have master's degrees from TSU across a range of disciplines so that they can teach college level courses, you know? And then for some who get the bug, this becomes their pathway into a doctorate, you know, usually someplace else. For many of our graduate students, the largest cohort of which is in our College of Education, where we offer 3 EDDs as well as, I think, 6 master's degrees now. We just added one. And these are people who are part of the community. They are teachers. All of our graduate courses are at night, with very, very limited exceptions. Certainly in our College of Education, they are all at night or on the weekends, and we have big summer programs that, again, respond to the demand and the need of people who are working and still want that credential, want that training, and want to make a contribution through their research. And so that, you know, that is in many ways why we exist as an institution. Finally, over the last 15 years, really, I guess the first one was maybe a little bit older than that. We've added 4 PhD programs, research-intensive PhD programs, 2 in STEM fields, pharmaceutical science and environmental toxicology, 2 in the social sciences, what we call administration of justice, and urban planning and environmental policy. And these are, again, they are, you know, the youngest of them is 15 years old. The oldest of them is about 20 years old. But in those programs, again, what we find is that we bring in our best students, in fact, tend to be people who are in the community, who don't want to go, who have responsibilities here, but have the skills and talents to work into, to do this high level of intellectual work necessary to earn a doctorate. And so, you know, I remember we had a very good history master's student who very much wanted to get a PhD in history. And I tried to work with her to encourage her to apply across, you know, what she was interested in and who I knew, you know, that I could get. And she's just sort of like, I'm not leaving Houston, you know? And, you know, the University of Houston didn't admit her because they didn't have anybody who did what she wanted to do. So she's in our administration of justice program now. And this is not an untypical thing that we face here at TSU. Now, how do we answer this? In the sense that, is this a problem even? Well, it is, because we have very limited offerings at TSU. You know, we do not offer the range that Rice offers, that UH offers, you know? And given the realities, as Mr. Jackson talked about, of the way the state looks at its stepchildren universities, we're not going to get the resources to be able to offer that sort of range anytime soon, as much as we try to get them. Well, what I would suggest is there needs to be a more realistic partnership between research institutions and institutions like TSU, ones that promote more integration that would allow our students and would allow Rice students, for example, to get the best of both possible worlds, to perhaps not have that really alienating experience that many of us had when we were in graduate school, you know, off doing a PhD. And at the same time, take advantage, enable, actualize the great skills that we have in institutions like TSU and Prairie View. Now, at TSU, we are about to embark on a new experiment with this. It is still in the very early planning stages. Under the leadership of our current president, Dr. Alicia Crumpton-Young, we have launched what we call the College of Transdisciplinary Studies. And the goal here is to offer a range of degrees, from degree completion degrees at the baccalaureate level, all the way up to doctorates, that will allow us to provide the sort of training, the sort of guidance to skilled people into programs that they in part define themselves with the guidance of the TSU faculty. The details of this are still being worked out, you know, so I can't give you a whole lot, but it's something that is quite consciously an effort to address some of these issues that I've just outlined in talking with you. So, with that, you know, I don't want to be, I hope I haven't come across as depressing about this, because it's not. It's hard work, you know, but it's good work. And it's, you know, and you see the results in the students that come out of the efforts that institutions like ours make. So, and that is why we have got to keep trying to do that work to make that possible. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I need to first give a shout out to Brother CJ, who has my keys somewhere, because I rolled and passed through here no less than 3 times in the last 15 minutes, wondering where I was. And some lone Black man on a golf cart was like, clearly you were lost, and just rolled me around the campus. So thank you. Rice is showing very excellent hospitality today. So thank you so much. I'm very glad to see these all this purple in the audience. It reminds me that I am home, even though I have one sister, I'll tell you, Dr. Maddox, just one, who did her PharmD at Texas Southern, and we, pity her, but also she understood the assignment, because both of her children graduated from Prairie View A&M University, and her daughter-in-law and her granddaughter is coming there next year. So we understand what happens in the Price dynasty. That's what we're calling it now, the Price dynasty that's happening at Prairie View. So thank you guys so much. I wanted to talk to you a little bit. The concept I'm building on today is content creation, right? When I was in undergrad, I didn't know. Before I came to undergrad, I didn't know college professors or people who had PhDs, except for one who was an art professor at Texas Southern, Sarah Trotty, actually. But she also taught me art at Vacation Bible School, and I could never put those things together. Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, how can she be telling children to finger paint and be a college professor? My mother was like, that's exactly why we hated when she came, because she was like, explore your creativity, and it always ended in a mess. But anyway, I didn't know any PhDs really. I mostly assumed that all the people who wrote textbooks were either very old or dead. That was how I imagined it, right? Like, I met a guy one time who was alive, who wrote one of my textbooks, and I almost saw him as a ghost. I was like, what? Not you. I mean, I understood people like Toni Morrison was alive, and I understood, people like J. California Cooper, but the people who wrote the textbooks in the schools, I didn't understand necessarily that they were people who were creating knowledge. And it was not until in 1991, I came to Prairie View as a student in the Benjamin Banneker Honors College that I actually began to meet scholars and professors. And I learned that there was a whole level of knowledge production that I could be a part of, thanks to the vision of Dr. Jewel Prestige. And so in college, there are these people who write the books, and then there are these people who teach the books that other people write. And so I want to offer you some arguments about why we should all aim to be the people who write the books, and articles and other stuff too, but let's focus on books today. I call this content creation because what I'm trying to explain is analogous to social media and the ways that Black people use platforms to create content, right? African Americans are 44% more likely than every other group to have a social media account. We are early adapters of social media technology. And we're not just early adapters, we are innovators of social media technology. And the way you know that is because as soon as African Americans figure out how to monetize social media products, those social media companies put things in place to take that ability away. Read about Instagram, read about the Vine that used to exist. Right? And so we know that African Americans understand content creation. And I'm sure that many of you have spent a lot of time wasting time, but also wondering why these content creators don't have better things to do. I know you've thought it. I know you've watched these people do these dances and you were like, do these people have a life, even though you're sitting there watching it on your phone? I know, but here's what they do. They start and lead trends. They shape the narratives of what constitutes entertainment. They set the standard of how we should behave. They shape how we use our leisure. Think about the ice bucket challenge or the 18 million line dances my mama has learned at the Texans Y, or Versus. I know y'all watch Bun B. I know y'all watched it. Some of y'all like, who in the hell is Bun B? But the rest of y'all, I know you watched it. And think about how much time is spent that we spend engaged with these things, even if it's just to watch. And if you think that Black people and their use of social media, their experience, their process of content creation is just frivolities and leisure, where would we be without the hashtag created by Opal Tometi, Alicia Garza, and Patrisse Cullors, hashtag Black Lives Matter. See, African-Americans are also, 72% of African-Americans also use their social media accounts to engage in activism, to learn about activism, to post and repost information about protests and activism, to use hashtags that promote activism. And so we are also using these hashtags to create content about how we want the world to look. Without that hashtag, we would not know the names Trayvon Martin or Michael Brown Jr., or Houston's own George Floyd, or Prairie View's own Sandra Bland. My point is that Black people understand content creation, and getting a PhD is just content creation. The difference is the content that you are shaping is the content that students learn in classrooms. It's the content that lawmakers use to shape laws and policies. It's the content that philanthropic organizations use to determine who they will give their money to. When you have the credentials and the skill set to be in conversations and shape outcomes and decisions that are made, you are creating the most important content. If you are a person who feels you have something to say, and that's probably everybody in this room, especially because I'm on Facebook and I understand that people feel like they have a lot to say. A lot of it is wrong. I have a whole philosophy. I probably shouldn't tell y'all this, but I don't argue with people on Facebook. And if people try to pull me into arguments, I have a whole quote that I use for this, which is, I school fools for a living. I don't do it on Facebook. That's my whole argument. That's what I do for my job. That ain't what I'm doing for you. I don't even know you. I can't do that kind of stuff now that I'm actually at home in Prairie View, right? Because I represent the university in a different kind of way. But when I work for Rutgers, I'd be like, you must not know about me. Anyway, now I have a whole, standard to uphold, you understand? So if you're a person who feels you have something to say and you are willing to get the necessary skills to do the research to understand whether or not the assumptions and theories that you have in your head are actually demonstrable, are actually provable, are actually important, are actually significant, right? Because we all got a lot of theories. We all have a lot of stories. But theories and stories without research are just anecdotes. They're just fairy tales, right? And lots of people are peddling you fairy tales about what Black people are, about what it means to be Black, and they have no evidence to support it. And we are believing it because we don't have the skills to challenge it, and we don't have enough people to challenge it. And in Texas, more than anywhere else, we know that what is in books matters, because look at how many people who are trying to control in this state what happens in books. They're trying to control content creation. Here also, I want to add some of the intangibles that getting a PhD has given me as a first-generation college student raised from the Sunnyside section of Southeast Houston, the most important section I would like to add. That's right. I didn't go to Jack Yates or Wheatley or none of these other places. I went to a school called Law Enforcement, but I did go to Sunnyside Elementary, and I'm very proud of that. It has given me entree into rooms and spaces with people who have real power. And if you've ever been in a room with people who have real power, you know it. And once you've been in a room with people who have real power, you actually argue less in rooms where people don't have power. It's like, I'm not gonna argue with you because you ain't gonna do nothing. I'm gonna say this argument for people who actually can have the power to actually do something. And I have used my expertise and experience in those places. It has also given me the opportunity to travel the world. I tell students this all the time, and I have traveled the world on other people's dime. Because see, when you're a professor, all you have to do is find a conference somewhere in the world. That's harder at HBCUs. Y'all should consider, if you want to give to something, give money for conference travel for students and professors. But I've gone to Australia. I'm going to France in 2 weeks, all on Vanderbilt's dime. It ain't even Prairie View. Like, and all of that is something that I don't know that I would be able to do if I hadn't become a professor, right? Because I know how much these tickets cost. And so it has allowed me to travel far and beyond the spaces that my family has traveled. My family has descendants from slavery in Eagle Lake, Texas. We have traveled all of 65 miles since slavery. And from my experiences of getting a PhD, I have been able to go places even beyond their imagination, right? One of the greatest gifts I want to offer, and I'm not going to be like Reverend Falls, I'm going to actually close. I'm going to actually close. One of the greatest gifts of getting a PhD has done for me is that it has removed all doubts that I sometimes had about what people might think of my HBCU education. At this point, I have walked into spaces where people have never heard of Prairie View A&M University, ever. Literally have to tell them where it is. And there was a point early on, we talk about alienation, Dr. Maddox, where I would be so embarrassed that they didn't know, right? Because people were there from Northwestern and nobody ever explains where Northwestern is, and nobody ever explains where Mount Holyoke is, and nobody ever explains where UC Berkeley is. No, people don't explain these things. And I have walked into these rooms, and the thing that I have learned over time is that the fact that I am in this room with you is enough. We all end up in this same place, and here is where the competition starts. Having an HBCU education, sending people off to get PhDs is to affirm the fact that their education means something. And the thing that has also been true is that the main idea of my dissertation and my first book, the idea was generated on the campus of Prairie View A&M University. I think about the projects that I have done and and how I teach students and my vision for a more equitable world. All of these things was gifted to me by my HBCU. I have a twin sister. I should tell you that in case you ever come across her. Her name is Melinda. She's also a college professor. It ain't going to be very helpful, but I'm telling you right now, if you ever meet a person, they're like, I don't know you. It could be me, but it also could be my twin sister. So she says the thing that I believe, which is I got my intellectual life from Prairie View, and I got the skills from the University of Michigan, which is where she went, and I went to Ohio State. And if you are lucky and if you're fortunate enough to get a PhD, and I think you should, sometimes you might go out in the world and learn the things you need to learn and make the mark that you think you want to make. And then you get to come back home and use all of those skills and all of the things you have learned to share and to pour in to the next generation of students who look just like you. And for that, I am ever grateful. Thank you.
I thought that was me.
No, it was me. Sorry.
Hi, everyone. My name is Njideka Norum, but most people know me by Cindy. And I do have a small correction. I'm not a doctor yet. I'm close, but not a doctor yet. But I will say Dr. Norum doesn't really have a nice ring to it. So doctorate loading. Yes, exactly. So as it was mentioned, I am a graduate student here at Rice University. I'm in the Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering program. And today I'm going to talk about my path to graduate school and kind of how I got to this point. So just to let you know, I didn't really decide I wanted to go to grad school until 6 months before I applied. As it was stated, I went to Arizona State University and got my bachelor in chemical engineering. And the pathway through that program, they pretty much set you up to go to industry. That's kind of what the expectation is. You're an engineer. Our school was right down the road from Intel. So the plan was you go get a degree, become a process engineer, work at Intel, have a great career. But I was on that path. I actually was interning at Intel the time that I decided that I want to go to grad school. I had a project manager who gave me tasks to work on one of the systems where I was collecting data, analyzing, and offering changes to Intel that they could utilize for their systems to improve efficiency. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was something that I really liked. And I was like, okay, this is great. I finally found the career path that I want. This is what I'm going to go and do. But when I took the time to speak to entry-level engineers, people who were on my team, and I expressed to them, this is what I want to do, they said to me, well, that's great, but all those people that you've talked to, the people that you're working with that do the work that you want to do have doctorates. It's not something that's really offered to someone who has a bachelor degree. You kind of have to work, you need to have the skill set, you need to prove to Intel that you have the capabilities to do so. And at that point, I never heard of a PhD. I mean, it was something that my dad had mentioned. He was like, I would love to have a doctor in the family. He wanted me to go to med school. I decided to become an engineer. That kind of killed his dream. So he's like, how about grad school? And of course I was like, well, that just sounds like more school. I mean, I'm going to get a nice paying job. Does it really matter for me to become a doctor? But at that point, I started to consider it more seriously because the career path that I did want and what I actually wanted to do post-graduation was I needed a doctorate for. So I went to my good friend at the time, google.com, and I did a search. How do I get to grad school? What do I need to do to get to grad school? And one of the first things that popped up was taking the GRE. So at that point, I signed myself up for a course that was offered at my university. I bought some books and I hunkered down and studied to prepare to apply to graduate school. Your first semester, or not your first semester, excuse me, the fall semester of your senior year at my university was probably one of the most challenging. So the things that I wanted to do was try to get this GRE out of the way so that I could focus my time to try to graduate. So, because if you can't graduate, you can't go to graduate school, you can't get a job. So I set myself up to take that exam the first week of August. And then when I did take it, I didn't do that well, at least from the perspective of checking with scores that I found online of what type of scores you need to get on the GRE to get into grad school. And I didn't make it pretty much anywhere except for the essay writing portion, which I'm not a writer. I'm not that great of a writer. Don't know how I did it, but that was the only high score that I was able to achieve. So at that point, it put me into a corner of what do I do next? Ultimately, what I need to do to be able to get to the career path that I want is to get this PhD, but as it's sitting right now, I don't have the scores to do so. So I signed up for another one. I had to try to study during the semester. So on top of working to pay for school, on top of just trying to keep up with courses, I was practicing for a GRE that I had to take the day before Thanksgiving. So telling my parents, hey, before we have our festivities, you kind of have to drop me off at a test center 45 minutes away so that I can take this test. It wasn't the most ideal situation, but it was a situation that I needed to do in order to get to where I wanted to be. Between the time of me taking my first GRE and going into my second one, I actually had the opportunity to visit Rice University. I went to the Gulf Course Undergraduate Research Symposium, which is an opportunity for undergraduate students to present their research on campus. And I had the opportunity, I took that time to meet with faculty members, meet with students, and just let them know, this is kind of where I'm at right now. And this is what I'm struggling with into getting to grad school. What are your thoughts? And I had the opportunity to speak with a faculty member and I expressed to them my scores and they were like, oh, those seem all right. And I was like, Google told me otherwise. And they expressed, well, Google's not really the one admitting you into grad school. Yeah. But some of the things that you should consider looking into outside of having your GRE scores is your statement of purpose. Why do you want to come to Rice? Or why do you want to come to any university that you're so applying to? And then your letters of recommendation. And to let you know, I hadn't started writing my statement of purpose. I hadn't really asked anybody for a letter of recommendation because from my perspective, what I needed was a strong GPA and strong GRE scores. So the information was helpful, but I went back stressed because at this point, it was the middle of November. Most of my applications were due the middle of December, and I hadn't really reached out to any faculty members or even started my statement of purpose. So I began scrambling, looking for faculty members who would be willing to write me letters. People told me no in the sense of, I don't have enough time to write it. It's right before finals. I can't write a letter and prepare finals for my classes, or I don't think I could write you a strong letter of recommendation. So I struggled a lot in that point to try to figure out who could advocate for me in the sense of say, you can go to graduate school. And then as far as the statement of purpose, I didn't even get a chance to start that until I finished my finals, which was the first week of December. So I had a week and a half to try to craft a statement to state, this is who I am, and this is why I believe I should be at your school. So all of that to say is I somehow was able to put it together. I wouldn't be here today if I wasn't able to get letters of recommendation, a statement of purpose, a GRE score that was quote unquote good enough to get me into a school. But what I will say is at that time, I was 20. I had paid for everything on my own on top of going through school. And I reached a point where I was like, is this really worth it? This was such a huge investment. And I was like, you know, you worked for Intel, you can easily get a job. But ultimately, where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do post-graduation was directly related to this PhD. So like I said, it all worked out in my favor. I am going into what I hope is my final year of my PhD. So all this work, all that struggle ultimately led to a positive result. But I do believe hindsight is 2020. Some of the things that I think that I wish I could have told myself in that process of applying to a graduate school is to ask more questions. I definitely pigeonholed myself into looking into one resource. I could have gone to faculty members, and I am grateful for the fact that when I did come to Rice, I did talk to faculty members to get a better understanding of how to apply to graduate school, but that's one of the things that I wish I took time to ask. I wish I spoke to more graduate students to get a better understanding of their path. How did they get here? How did it compare to mine? And then how do they felt that they grew throughout the duration of their PhD? Because I've grown and changed a lot. And some of the hiccups that I hit along my way as I talk to my peers are things that they were also going through that I wish that I got an opportunity and chance to talk about before I came here. But yeah, that's all I would like to say about my pathway to grad school. It wasn't necessarily easy, but it was my path and it is my story. And I'm glad I had the opportunity to express that to the audience here, those who are in person and those who are online. And if you do ever get an opportunity or you do want to get into graduate school, I am more than happy to help and guide you in any which way that I can. Thank you.
So at this time, we're on flight, Freedom Work, Juneteenth. So we'll have everybody to go to the two left and right side to stand up and ask your questions at the mic. So at this time, if you have any questions, please line up at the mic.
Our viewers online, I disappointed them last time. They had a lot of questions and I only asked one of them.
Okay.
So I'd like to begin by getting at least two of them out and then we'll see.
Absolutely. So we'll start with yourself.
So we have a question from Toya Bell, who is a Rice University alumni and incoming ARA president-elect. She would like to hear some information or advice that the panelists would have for people who are interested in beginning graduate school later in life. And a second question that the audience would like comment on, particularly from the soon-to-be Dr. Naroom, is can you comment on the difference between the skills that are measured in the GRE and the skills that are actually needed and important for the type of research that scholars do?
Go first. Okay. So I personally found the GRE to be another standardized test. I know a lot of students take either the SAT or ACT, and then by the time they get through for undergraduate, they realize that a lot of the information that they use or that they had to learn for that test, they don't necessarily utilize in their undergraduate career. And I personally feel the same. The way that the test was structured, you have sections for writing, you have sections for reading comprehensions, you have sections for math. And I found the GRE to be, at least through the course that I took, the course pretty much stated that you're learning how to take that test and test specifically. It's just not really an indication of your own personal knowledge, just how well you take the test. So I felt that the skills that I needed to achieve, be able to take that GRE were beneficial at that time, but I've learned and gained a whole different type of skill set throughout my PhD, ones that I needed to be able to conduct experiments or write articles, collaborate with students that I don't necessarily think the GRE prepares you for any of that.
Well, I can make a comment about the GRE and its relative uselessness.
Yeah.
There's been a national movement, particularly in graduate education, to move away from the GRE completely. You know, any program that you're applying to in graduate school is going to look for, you know, a very specific set of skills that are unique to what you need to succeed in that program. And the GRE is just, you know, it does not measure any of those things, you know? So at TSU, we have dropped the GRE requirement from most of our master's programs. We still have it for our doctoral programs. University decision-making is actually not made by administrators. You know, it's a collaborative process with faculty. And I've been up there preaching, let's get rid of the GRE. We don't need it. It doesn't do anything. You don't use it. You're just putting it there as a, you know, make them jump through a hoop to get in. And we have lots of senior faculty members that sort of like, nah, we got to keep it. We got to keep it. So that's my insider's take on that. The one thing I would say about going back to school, that certainly is at TSU, a substantial proportion of our graduate students are people who have experience and who decide they want to come back to school. And like I said, in many cases, it's for professional reasons. In other cases, it's because they have found what it is that they want to do. And it is certainly viable. And as an instructor, as a professor, I would tell you they're the better students, you know. So it's something that, you know, I wouldn't discourage anyone from pursuing, you know, and there are pathways that, again, may not be straight into Rice University, but there are pathways for someone to do that. And places like TSU are a place where you can explore some if you want to.
One of the things that I've spent most of my life working with undergraduates, so I'll talk a little bit about them. And every time they say, I'm going to take some time off to do something else, and then I'll come back. The thing that I always say to them is the two things that are most likely to prevent you from coming back is debt. That means you have a job, you cannot quit. Because graduate students don't make a lot of money, no matter what they're getting their degree in. Debt, and whether or not you have saddled yourself with lots of responsibilities. That doesn't mean you can't get a degree if you have those responsibilities. I'm mostly trying to figure out how I can make it easier for them, right? But the thing that I will say is that we have lots of examples of people who have gone on to have other careers and get PhDs. And in fact, if you're in business and technology, it's actually encouraged that you go and have a life and bring life experience. And so what you should do if you're thinking about coming back to school is to think about that life experience as part and parcel of the package you bring to graduate school. So don't try to ignore the fact that you have been doing other things. Don't make excuses for the fact that you took time out or that you're coming back at 40. Talk about the ways in which, having had that time off, you have learned and gained skills that allow you to be more thoughtful about the process, right? Use it as a part of the credentials that you have to go back to graduate school.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, panelists. We'll take the question here.
Oh, let me say this too, by the way.
Absolutely.
If you're a full-time PhD student and you have small kids, often your schedule works on the same schedule as your children, which means you have Christmas off, you have holidays off, you have all of those things off, which means you can work on the cycle of your children. Just keep that in mind too. So it's not, there are some benefits to it as well.
Excellent point.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jayla Lewis, and I am a second-year biochemistry PhD student at University of Houston. It's so lovely to see a lot of people who actually look like me in here. I'm very grateful to see you all here today. So to kind of give you some context, I was born in Alabama. I was raised in the city of Atlanta for like the majority of my life. And so I always had a community to fall back on, even when I was in spaces that were filled with people that don't necessarily look like me. And now that I'm here in Houston in a more alienating degree program, as Dr. Gregory was mentioning earlier, I find myself overcompensating. to the point where I had to change the octave of my voice just to make other people comfortable in the room. And my question to you all is, how can I navigate in those kinds of spaces without having to overcompensate? Because it's very exhausting.
First, let me say that I hear and see what you're saying and have experienced it myself. And I'm sorry that you're going through that. And I cannot imagine what it's like doing that in a pandemic. Graduate school, my administrative assistant is working on her Ph.D. She's actually watching this too. And she threatens to quit every 2 weeks. And every 2 weeks I say, look, the first year is the hardest. Everybody wants to quit in their first year. Did you want to quit in your first year? Everybody wants to quit. Am I right, Dr. Bird? Did you want to quit in your first year? Everybody wants to quit. You got to go past the first year because you're not in your right mind in that year. But the thing that I'll say is 2 things to you. One is find community on campus. And that doesn't have to be that often for people and feels like you isn't the people in your program. So you need to find other Black people on campus. Just figure out where they are and go start hanging out with them. They'll take you in, no problem. The second is you're going to have to find community off campus. This is going to sound very terrible, Reverend Falls, but the easiest way to do that is church. I mean, you don't have to go every Sunday. But I have found in my life, and I've lived in Ohio, I've lived in Connecticut, I've lived in New Jersey, I've lived in Pennsylvania, and I have found in my life that if you go find some old Black people in church and sit next to them and tell them you're a PhD student, they will give you the affirmation you need to go back to that campus. And if it's not church, if it's a mosque, if it's whatever that space is, if it's a community center, go volunteer. You're right at the University of Houston. There are all kinds of places in Third Ward that need people with tech backgrounds who can volunteer with kids. And what that's going to do is get you into a space where people who think you are amazing. And you need that to counterbalance what's happening to you in your PhD program, right? You need people who will constantly remind you that what you're doing is special, and then they shove you back in to figure out a little bit more, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody changes their voice. You're figuring out who you're going to be in this field. I want to encourage you now to start thinking about what your authentic self is. When I was in middle school, I went to Lanier Middle School. If you don't know anything about Houston, none of this matters. But I left Sunnyside Elementary going to Montrose to go to middle school on the bus. And I had never gone to white school with white children in my life. There were 3 white children in my elementary school, three, and they were siblings. And I used to change the way I talked when I got to Lanier. And I would change the inflections in my voice. And you talk about different things when you're there. But at some point, you have to figure out who you are everywhere and start figuring out that now. And that doesn't mean that you're trying to help other people understand who you are, because some of them are never going to get it. What you're going to have to do is figure out in yourself, what are your boundaries? What are the things you are not willing to do to get this thing? What are the costs that are too high? And then hold those places. And everything else, just try to, figure it out, get the credentials you need, and go on to the next space.
Excellent, thank you. Eureka?
Thank you.
And then after this young lady in the yellow, that will be the last question. Eureka?
Okay, great. Okay, thank you very much for sharing, because one of my questions was, if you were considering going back for your PhD, what would be the right pathway? She said at 40, what about at 55? If you're considering going forward and pursuing your PhD, what would be the benefit of looking at a university setting, or a lot of people are encouraging online, trying to get your PhD online? What are the pros and cons, if any, to those pathways?
If you don't mind, I'll take the first stab at this. Go to a university. The point of doctoral education is, in fact, the interplay, the exchange that you have, not just with the faculty, but with the other students. I won't give you my honest opinion of most online doctorates, except to say, go to a university. And but that's not just any university, find the program that you want to do, make sure that it is something that you are in, that inspires you, that you want to do. You don't just go to say, I've got a doctorate,
The thing that he doesn't want to say is that for-profit universities are notoriously predatory for African-American communities. So we talk about predatory loans, let's talk about for-profit institutions, right? The ones that rap on the radio. They're taking Black people's money and they're not graduating and they're putting them in lots of debt. And so what you want to do, I tell people, like, if you want to be an electrician, go to HCC, they got it. So if you want to get a PhD in your 50s, it sounds even better to me, because if you have kids, they're pretty much done. You know what I mean? Like, they're grown now. You can focus on yourself. You may have been at a job long enough. You can retire. So you have pension and a TA salary. That sounds wonderful. And now is the time to do that. We have an assistant professor in history. I want to say Dr. Tate, I shouldn't say this online, but Dr. Tate is up there. And she looks like she's having a ball, because she's also, unlike younger people who are trying to find themselves and who they're going to be for the rest of their lives in that moment, she has a good sense of who she is. So why not?
Yep. And last question, the lady in yellow sweater.
How you all doing? Thank you for presenting today. My name is Dr. Muhammad. I'm a researcher here in the biosciences department. And so my question today is, we're stopping at the PhD, but what about beyond the PhD when we talk about academia? So for like Sydney, I know your initial goal for coming to get your PhD was to go back into industry to do something with Intel potentially. But have you reconsidered that now as you progress through your program? And how does that look like in general, so that we could keep this pipeline, that it doesn't just stop at PhD and then go into industry, but actually more continuing on in academia?
I did personally go back and forth between the idea of going into academia, mainly because the decision for me to choose between industry and academia was a challenging one, and I didn't really have anyone to necessarily go to for questions. So I started considering myself that potential mentor, like, let me become that mentor that I always wanted. But throughout my PhD career, I realized that academia may not necessarily be what I want to do. I want to be more of a mentor. I want to be more of a professor. And a lot of the work that I'm doing, at least here at Rice, is leading me down down the path of like a tenure track research faculty professor. And that is personally not something that I'd want to do. So I still consider going into industry as an option, but I definitely do want to come back. I've met professors who have worked in industry for a couple of years, and their main purpose is to teach courses and serve as mentors towards students. And that's more so kind of the career path that I would like to go to, rather than just focus on tenure track teaching. But that's kind of what I've learned, at least throughout my PhD. It's still the similar path, but different, because ultimately I want to be able to come and give back to students like myself.
The line between the PhD and academia is increasingly blurred. People, especially in tech, people go back and forth. People have university affiliations and they also work at Google. People have all kinds of things. You just need to be very careful about protecting patents and other things, right? You need to think about your intellectual property. But on every side, the line between industry and universities is much more blurred. Universities themselves they don't want to talk about it, but many of them are practitioners in industries. I mean, that ION Center, that's a blur, right, between tech and industry. And so I don't want to encourage you not to think about it necessarily in that way, right? But I'll also say that the best part of my job, no matter how things are going, and it's been very hard to be back home, I'm not gonna lie, when you go from a flagship state institution where you've taught never more than 2 classes in your life, and a research account with money put in it regularly, to go to a place where you have to teach more and the resources are less, it has been difficult. But the thing that remains is that there's nothing better than standing in front of a group of students and seeing the moment when they get what you're telling them. Seeing the moment where they change how they thought about something, right? There's nothing better. Like I can't imagine another profession, maybe doctors when they tell you you don't have cancer. I don't know, but there must be other professions. But in the teaching profession, there is very few other places in life where you get to shape the people who are going to take care of you when you're old, where you get to ask them to rethink assumptions, where they come in so sure about something and you just get to bust that bubble. It's so fun. It's so fun. And so I would encourage you to think about, at some point, whether you're in industry or not, thinking about even teaching as an adjunct, teaching as a person in a practicum or a clinic. Think about those things.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, the lady, did you have a question?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
briefly.
Yes, ma'am. I'll make it real brief. And I know you knew I was from TSU, right? So that's why you're gonna cut me down.
No, ma'am.
But I'm just joking.
I had no way of knowing.
Just joking. Just joking. But two quick points, and if y'all could make a comment, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, I'm from Texas, it's y'all. But what I wanted to say was that pathways to PhD for me was closed-minded, because again, you don't have a lot of people around you who has a PhD or who be able to encourage you to go. I took a small town mentality to the military, didn't leave my base. But then even when I started going to school, that small town mentality stayed. Bachelor's, master's, applied for the PhD at U of H, didn't get it, quit. Again, a small town mentality or small culture mentality. So I'd like to ask that question to the panel. How do we break that? How do we encourage the young people? I bought my grands today. Come on over here, y'all. And they getting on my nerves, but I want them to understand.
Talk.
Yes, I want them to understand. I want them to broaden their minds at this age, because they can rap, they can sing gospel songs, they can research spirituals, but we got to be able to broaden their minds. So I just encourage all of y'all, again, when you have something like this, bring your children, bring somebody else's children to expand their minds. That's what we have to do. I know, I'm going to stop. But I'm a social worker. So Eric's stages of development. I'm at
pastor.
Yes, I'm at stagnation versus generativity. We have to get back to the next generation. We have to get a PhDs and give back and teach the next generations, because books are going to be stopped. And so all you have is your mind, and expand it. So if y'all want to comment on that, I appreciate it.
The only thing I'll say is the best thing you can do for children is get them onto college campuses early and often.
Yes.
My mom was in school when I was a kid. I went to class with her, and I saw, I sat in on the class. The professor talked to me. If I have students who have children and they say I can't come to class because something is with, I tell them to bring their children. I've had students who had babies in the middle of the semester and brought those babies to class. And so the best thing we can do is, people don't go places where that feel foreign, that they're afraid of. And then when they get to campus, I immediately start trying to figure out how I'm going to get them in summer research. So there's summer internships we know a lot about, but you can also do summer research. When I was an undergrad, Dr. Prestige encouraged me to do it. I did summer research at Penn State and at Ohio State. I ended up getting a PhD from Ohio State. We got to get them out early. Send them away as much as I can. Send them away so they can know that when they go there, it's less foreign to them, right? That's the beginning of encouraging them to get out. Because here's the thing that Dr. Maddox didn't tell you about the problem when you get all your PhDs and when you get all your degrees in Houston. Sometimes that means that you're not going to get hired in Houston. Most well-respected PhD programs do not hire their own PhDs, which means if you get all your degrees in Houston, you are absolutely going to be offered jobs elsewhere. So the best idea is to go somewhere else and then try to work your way back here. That's more likely to happen than for you to get all your degrees and then end up working for the rest of your life in the same location. What ends up happening then is you end up being underemployed as an adjunct for the rest of your life, and you don't want that.
Thank you. Thank you to our panelists. Great way to close the pathways to the PhD for Blacks and others.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Williams. I'm a graduate of Texas Southern University, I'm your moderator for the third and final session here this evening. This afternoon, we're going to cover Black entrepreneurship now, which is actually American entrepreneurship. We have this third and final session is a little different than the first two. And so we have a panel discussion after we have the keynote speakers speak. They'll ask questions. And then after they finish asking their questions, we'll open it up to the guests to ask their questions. With that, our panel, our three-person panel, begins with Donald Bowers, who is the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas Vice President. Donald has received his bachelor's degree from Rice University and MBA from Sam Houston State University as he walks up. We have Corey Williams, my classmate, and the current president of Texas Southern University's National Alumni Association and the owner of Choreograph Events. And we have Miss Courtney Johnson, who Rose is the Chief Executive Officer of George E. Johnson Development, which is a full-service real estate firm specializing in development services and owner representation, master planning, and residential and commercial brokerage. But the special guest this afternoon is Ms. Jennifer Dean. She is the president and founder of Dean's Professional Service. She doesn't like to brag about herself, but she's one of my favorite orators in the business. And with that, I would like to welcome Ms. Jennifer Dean to the podium.
Hi, everybody. Hello. I'm not used to standing behind anything to talk because I'm ADDD+. I like to walk and talk. But thank you. Thank you very much for having me. My name's Jennifer Lynn Dean. I thought he was going to bring up the middle name, but typically only when I'm in trouble do you hear it. So I have been in Houston maybe 37 years, maybe a little longer than that. I am from El Dorado, Arkansas. Anybody know where that is? You go. Because, oh, get out of Dodge. So thank you very much, sir. Let's see. That's better. Thank you. Okay, that's better. I'll miss all my notes. So there you go. You know, I want to tell everybody thank you, and thank you, my El Dorado person. When you're from a small town and you come to a big city, you don't, somebody said this earlier, you don't necessarily change the way you think about things, because I'm a really simplistic person. I like simple stuff. I run my business the same way. I've been in business now. This is my 31st year. Yes, I am aging in dog years and I'm old. But it's my 31st year in business. And I feel like every day, every year I'm new in business. So you're blessed to have a business, number one. You're blessed to be able to do it. Number two, to count your blessings daily would be important. So, you know, I'm the person who says I've got 86,400 seconds in a day. You do too, by the way. Just want to share that. And, you know, this is it. Today is all you have. This is what you get to make the very best of. For whatever reason this symposium is put together, there's a reason for you to be here. There's a reason for you to take advantage of it. You have to do what's necessary to put action to it. You know, we move toward that energy. And I will tell you, for me, for every day that I get up and I'm blessed to see the 86,400 seconds, I believe that I have a new business starting every day. I think like that. And I don't know about this word entrepreneurship. I appreciate it. I work hard every day. My service is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I tell people I sleep from 2 to 4. Don't bother me then. That's AM. That's it. Because I'm, you know, get a call here or something happens. But that's the responsibility you get when you open a business. I get a lot of people who say I'm in business. I don't get a lot of people who say I've stayed the course for that. And that's called stick-to-itness. I make up words, so go with me. We do that in Arkansas, so just work with me. There's no word called stick-to-itness like that, but you have to be able to have some stick-to-itness to be able to stay the course, because it's not always easy. I can guarantee you that. You will make a great deal of sacrifices. And I have 3.5 kids, and this made it my 4.5 kids, because that's kind of how you feel about your company. How many of you own a company of any sort? There you go. She did like that. You have to raise it high. So what we do in my company, we provide staffing, staff development, and consulting that is customized. And the word customized is very true to the word. It is customized in 20 different states and about 2,000 plus employees, and all in the medical field. So we're a full service solution that customized for most large facilities to be able to save them time, energy, and money in reference to what they do from a service perspective to their employees. That's what we do every day, all the time. For the last 30 years in the last 20 states. We just added Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and one other state up on the East Coast. And I will tell you, doing business on coast are very different than doing business in the big old state of Texas. It's a lot different. We do things very different here, I must say. So I got 20 minutes, and typically I can't say my name in 20 minutes. So I'm going to tell you, in the last 2.5 years, things have changed a great deal. I'm going to start with my story because somebody was talking about something just a little bit earlier, and it reminded me. When I came to Houston, I live in Katy, Texas, just in case you're wondering. But when I came to Houston, I owned a Malibu. Some of you are too young to even know what that is, but I did. And it was the one that didn't have air. And it had those seats that if you sat on them long enough, you'd have to peel yourself off of them because you would stick to it. And, you know, I decided, because I do this often, I decided that I was going to go to the Galleria, which I heard about, to go window shopping. Because back then, I won't even give it a year because I know some of you won't even, 1987, August 13th. I'll never forget today, the day that it happened, because I decided I was going to go window shopping because we were broke, skip a check, broke. Some of you don't know what that kind of broke is, but that you don't want to drive anywhere when you only have so much gas, because I have to figure out how I'm going to pay for the divorce when I get back. So I drove. I got on something called I-10. It was straight. I was good. And then I decided to take something called the 610 LOOP. I'm going to be clear. My Arkansas person, listen, we don't have loops like that in my hometown. We have loopy people sometimes, but not loops like that. So I got on this thing called the 610 LOOP. That's all I can say because I didn't actually know it was a circle. This is a true story. I got on it and I started riding on this thing called the 610 loop. I went around the first time. I thought I was doing good because listen, we did not have Google, Waze, all these other things in 1987. We had maps, and if you unfold them, you will cover the entire windshield up, and then you didn't know how to fold them back. We didn't have cell phones to call somebody and say, I'm lost. We didn't. I got lost today. We didn't have that. We had to fake it till we made it. We had to keep going. And for somebody like me, who certainly doesn't want to ask for directions, I kept driving. Okay, that's not that funny. I did. I kept driving. But that third time around, I have to tell you, I started recognizing that I had passed this before. How many of you have ever had something in life where you feel like, I have passed this before? Been there. So I decided, I made this decision all by myself because I knew I was going to get a divorce when I got home. By the way, I've been married 40 years. I would not have made it to 40. I decided to take an exit. Any exit. It didn't matter what exit because I was eventually going to be out of gas and I was going to stop anyway. The worst part about August in Houston is it's hot. I took an exit. I stopped at a Chevron station right over by the Galleria. I got out, I went in, I said to the young man, can you tell me where the Galleria is? He said, right over here. I was that close to my goal of getting somewhere and did not even realize it. Some of us get that close to getting where we need to be and not even realize it. And let me just tell you what happened that day. Something deep inside, you know how those voices speak to you? Something deep inside said to me, so this is what your life looks like right now. You're on the loop and you're looping for life. You don't have any sense of direction. You don't know what exit to take. You just driving until you either run out of gas, have a flat, or be just on the side of the road. How many of you been there? You've gotten on that loop and you've been looping. Let me tell you about entrepreneurship. You've gotten on that loop and you've been looping and looping until you take an exit or ask for some direction. I did. And you know, I will tell you, for me, I had to make decisions about who I was as an entrepreneur. Let me just tell you, I lived in this 1,500 square foot home, 3 bedrooms, small kitchen, 1 living room. And every single day I got up, I put my pantyhose on, I put my suit on. I know some of y'all don't know what pantyhose are, but I still wear them. I put my pantyhose on, I put my suit on, I put my makeup on, I put my hair together. I walked around the corner. I started working, and I worked from 8 to 5 every day because it's mind over matter. Either you control it or it will control you. There isn't an option in that. Let me be clear. Because see, I had to teach myself how to be disciplined. I had to teach myself how to stay focused. I'm ADDDD. I must be clear. I have a lot of energy. Can you tell? And every day I sat down, I said, you know, I have to do this. I have to make this work. Now, running a company is one thing, but you still have to get paid. Yep, you still have to have money to function. I must be clear about that, because where you focus is where you go, and who you are around is who you will become. No doubt about it. If you ever want to know who you are, check your surroundings. It will tell you so much about who you are. So I did that every day for 3.5 months. I went to that Houston's on Kirby, and I had American Express, don't leave home without it. And I'd say, oh, have whatever you'd like. I was praying. They said I wanted water, because all I ever had was water, because I couldn't afford to pay their meal. But I had to do my interviews. I had to make sure it looked good and it felt good. Perception is reality. Finally, I decided that I was going to move into an executive suite. They put me out, but I did decide to move there. I had a 6-month executive suite. About 3 months into it, she said, ma'am, we're answering the phone just for you, it seems like. You got people coming in here, and our receptionists have to take care of everybody. You're going to have to leave. We'll let you out of your lease. And I thought, well, all right. So then I had to find somebody who would find something for me that I could afford. My first office was $650.87. It was 2 rooms. And I said, oh my goodness, how am I going to pay that and pay? You got a house note and now you got another house note? That's what I thought. But let me tell you, once you start moving forward, you don't get to look backwards, because you will bump into things. You've got to keep moving. I did. I said, I won't stop. I will tell you, I am blessed and highly favored, but I won't stop. I kept going, and I did. I stayed in that one building. I moved a little bit more space. And by the time I ended there, I was at 10,000 square foot. I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you, you have to work hard at what you do. And it takes a lot of work. So when people come to me and say, I want to open a company, I say, do you want to sacrifice everything? Because you're going to have to put it all there. You can't play that. You can't, I'm going to do it one day, next day. No, it's like knowing when to jump into jump rope. You feel like you're always doing that. You have to put it all there. Every bit of it. And when people come and say, will you mentor? I say, I just need your business plan. I just need to see what your budget looks like. And then I just need to, I never see them again. Because I will tell you the things that matter. I've had the same attorney since I've been in business for my 31 years. I've had 2 banks, and I've had 2 CPA firms. If you ask me for my books, I can show you, and they are clean. One of the things we don't do as well is we do business well, but our back end suffers a great deal. We got to clean both sides up. You have to be able to present that. And let me just tell you, I do this because I am the expert at what I do. I surround myself with people who are the experts at what they do. I don't need to be my own attorney. I don't need to be my own CPA. I don't need to be my own anything except what I do well. And when I need the experts, I go get them because they have been with me long enough to know, well, they know good and well about me because I'm outspoken, I am determined, I'm self-motivated, and I will tell you in a minute how I feel. But they respect that because consistency and continuity is critical. Did I take my 20 minutes up yet? Okay, because you know I can do that. Thank you, sir. She said I could keep going, so. You know, I will tell you, I'm pretty honest, but when the pandemic happened, and I had about 44 people in my corporate office, about 2 months into it, we had to lay everybody off. A month later, we brought everybody back. And then we figured out 6 of those people couldn't work from home because we couldn't find them. I mean, you online and we're not even a picture's up. And I will tell you, I gave up my salary to pay them because I believe your team is all you have. And you should hear me, for those of you who are in a company or in a position of some leadership, the fish rots from the top down. Lead by, in every way, lead by. Somebody brought their kids here to see this because they were leading by. That's all you can do. Talk, it really gets cheap after a while. Demonstration is, people need to see that demonstration. There is nothing in my office I cannot do. And if I don't feel that it's a good match, I will make you a free agent. My HR team tells me all the time, please don't make people free agents. I love football, can you tell? But there's a season for everything that happens. There is. And in this season, I'm talking about our pandemic that all of us went through. And let me be clear, this wasn't about race. You couldn't buy yourself out of this. This wasn't about money. We all experienced something, and some of us are still experiencing it. I sent lunch to my staff, and they delivered it to every home. And I don't mean just to them, I meant to the full families. I did everything I could to make sure they understood, although we're on this Zoom, Teams, whatever they want to call that kind of thing. I don't particularly care for it, but whatever they want to call that, I like touching and feeling. I like to be involved. I like to see you. I like to talk to you and not feel like I got a beach behind you and you need to be on it. I want to do that. But we started and we had to throw some things out the window. And listen, change is my first, second, and third name. They give you 3 names in the country. It is, because if you're not willing to pivot and change on a dime sometimes, because we did not expect this. I doubled my business in a year. We tripled it in 3. This is our 3rd year going into this, because we had to say whatever we have to do, we have to do it. We had to throw titles out. We had to throw out paperwork. We had to throw things out. And we said, what do we need to do to take care of the things we need to right now? Oh, I'm very proud of my team. I have a super terrific executive team. I have a great team. And everybody said, we do what we have to do to survive. Did you? You changed some things. You modified some things. You worked through some things. As an entrepreneur, you have to say, change, if I've got to do it, lead by. Everybody gets to do it. We did. I was so ready to go back to the office. I didn't know what to do. I know. My whole team said, not yet, Miss Dean. We're not ready yet. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. I said, I'm still in the middle of panicking, but I still need to get back to my office. I did. We're back at work now. We came back this year, but I will tell you, that was interesting to say the least. But for those of you who had to go through something and didn't thrive that way, listen, sometimes you just need to change and be confident on where you stand, because let me tell you, you were given the vision. So you were given the responsibility to carry out the vision. And sometimes that's just lonely and hard. But it is one of the things that I was called in to do, so I do it every single day. And I will tell you, I absolutely love what I do. I'm passionate about it because here's the thing I know. I have 3 P's: purpose, passion, and I got great peace. That's not proper English, just FYI. But I do. Because if you live life with purpose, you got to lean into it. You do. You really have to lean into it. And purpose has no age. I just want to be clear about that because some of us can be 80 and still be here because we've not lived our purpose. And with that purpose, you get this wonderful thing that comes about. You get passion for what you do, and that brings peace. Can you believe passion and peace go together? Those are my 3 P's. If you lean into your purpose, you will lean into your passion, and you will come about with great peace. He said I had 2 minutes. I got 1 now. I say all of that to tell you, for me, I believe everybody has, I would have chosen to do something else with my life, trust me. But I was chosen to do this with my life, not me. So if you're going to step out of the boat and walk on the water, you can't think about drowning when you're trying to walk on the water. You can't do both. You're either going to get out of it or you need to stay in and paddle on back to the shore because you got to get up some more confidence to say, when you get out of the boat, you can't focus on will I drown? You need to focus on how can I walk? Because after 31 years, every morning I get up, I say, thank you, because I have this opportunity one more time. Everybody doesn't get this opportunity. I have a great banker. I have a great lawyer. I have a great CPA, and they all give me great advice. Some I take, some I don't. But I will tell you, you have to be your very best today to want to be in this type of business. And every day you get up, be thankful for what you have, not for what you don't have. Try to change your stinking thinking. That's what my grandmother used to tell me all the time, baby. My grandmother was a maid all of her life. All of her life. She put 6 kids through college on a maid salary, and we can't do it on a CEO salary. 6 kids. And she always told me, you want your kids to be better than you are. And I'm telling you, for all of us, first of all, I am a woman and I am Black and I'm proud of it. I don't go into it with saying what my color is or what I'm a female or any of that. I go into it saying I am blessed and highly favored and I'm going to stay my course until my course is over. Live your purpose. Live with passion. Live with peace. Thank you, guys.
We're going to open it up to our panel next 20 minutes with questions.
I do have one question.
Uh-oh.
And I've been blessed to be able to hear you speak before, and I love your enthusiasm every single time I hear you, and it's always inspiring. My first question is, in regards to Black entrepreneurship, what is the greatest challenge and most rewarding element of being an African-American business owner?
Okay, so most rewarding is having the opportunity to look and see, each day you've accomplished something. I tell people all the time, when you make a things to do list, put 10 things down. You don't have to put any more than that because then they start using that word, I'm overwhelmed. If you check off all 10, you feel a sense of accomplishment. You can flip the page and put 10 more. You can do that all day. But mine is seeing people strive to be better, want to be better. I hired people who were single parents a lot. We used to go right out of Vegas. They'd never been out of the city. Furthermore, being able to do things that would benefit others is that is my purpose in life. I think that's most rewarding. It's certainly not the money that most people think they're going to make because you're going to give Uncle Sam most of that. Make more, give more. That should be our slogan. It's not that. It's just having the ability to lead by example and know that you're not, there's no faking in it, you know, because most people know when you are. But this is a business, being an entrepreneur, and particularly being a Black entrepreneur, because I've had many people tell me, first, they would not work for me because I was Black. And two, they would not give me business because I was Black. So, you know, I've had many people say that to me. And I still have people say it today. So this is not I was born in 1963. This is not that. This is where we live today. But, you know, knowing that I am able to say every day, I'm going to give it all I have to give. And what you put out, you get back.
Ms. Dean.
Yes, sir.
You talked about your CPA, your banking relationship, your attorney. Can you tell us a little bit about your banking relationship, how you developed the banking relationship, and what does it mean to have a banking relationship?
Well, I can. So when I first started, I had no clue what this word banking thing meant. None at all. It can be a little political sometimes, but none at all. So I had this wonderful thing I did. My husband put together some graphics, and I needed a line of credit. I had no idea that that wasn't a credit card. So I needed a line of credit. And I went to a bank. They aren't in business anymore. And I showed him my graphics, and he got wrapped up in the graphics and said, oh, just tell me what you need. I got $5,000 line of credit. I know y'all don't think that's a lot of money, but for me, that was a lot of money. Ooh, it was a lot of money. And, you know, I learned then that there was a lot of control on that side. And to be able to have things, the first thing I learned was that they looked at something and they thought, well, this is really good. It looked good, it felt good, it presented well. And he lost himself there. So he was ready to say, oh, I can sign off on that. And since that time, I've had a few bankers, but I've had a few people who will come in and behind doors say, I need you to do it this way, or I need you to make sure this is done, or I'll get you this as long as you get me that. I've learned so much from them. And I will tell you, you can't survive in business without great banking relationships. You cannot. You just can't. I mean, they want you to borrow money. I mean, that's the whole point of banking. But you can't. You have to have people who will look on your behalf and make sure things are good on your behalf. But when they ask you for something, you have to be able to produce it immediately. And they need to know that they're investing in you. So they need to know that they're going to get a return on their investment. So my relationships they've been great. I don't need to be groomed. They don't have to take me to lunch every week. I don't need them to send me flowers or anything. I just need them to do their job to make sure my job is easier. And that's what I tell them every time they come. Hey, listen, I don't need you to groom me. I don't need you to take me and do all of that. I just need you to do a really good job on the back end. And I will tell you, when we started the pandemic and all of us needed, we were filling out loans. Let me tell you who did it for us. Some of you say it was complicated. Nobody followed up. My bankers were the ones, because your bankers, it went through the bank. So you needed your banker. And our bankers, they did everything for us. They called us, they followed up, they told us what to do. They told us when to do it. They told us how to do it. They were right there with us the whole time. And that helped a great deal, because, you know, it was all involved in the bank, and, you know, following up and making sure you were going to get your loan or whatever you needed to do really mattered. So I will tell anybody who says they don't need that and I can use my personal account, I don't write checks. I don't even know how to. And I don't want to. If there is a check in my company that's over 500, it requires 2 signatures. And it's on purpose, because someone in banking told me a long time ago, when you get desperate, you'll do anything. And I don't want to put myself in that position, so I've never done it. I have no clue how, and I don't want to know. And we manage that way.
Ms. Dean, great
yes,
job.
Sir. Yes, ma'am.
My question is on building a team. You mentioned that a team is everything.
Yes, it is.
How do you find and nurture talent?
Whew. In today's world, let me just tell you now. Well, that's good. That's good. So here's what I tell people all the time, because turnover is going to happen. I always say, I pray God sends me those that should be and remove those that should not be, even if I don't like it. And there have been many times I did not like it. But building a team is tough, because the dynamics of personalities after pandemic, it's even tougher. We're a bit fragile. We're a little bit on our emotions right now. We're moving, and I tell people, don't move on your emotions because you'll get yourself in a lot of trouble if you do that. But building a good team is one of those things that I think it takes the entire office to do. It takes everybody working together to be able to say the dynamic works or it doesn't work. And one of the things that's really difficult for me is to release and let go. It is, because somebody may not be a good match. Maybe they're a good match someplace else. They're just not a good match for us. And I may hang on a little longer than I need to. So I have a great team that does a super terrific job. And I try to stay out of it until I have to get in it. But in general terms, my oldest employee has been there 26 years. And I have 26, 22, 20, 18, 16, 14. So I have a good core group of people who've been there for a very long time. Now, I try to do everything in the world to have good employees. And I tell people all the time, I do workshops all the time. And I tell people, please don't go in and ask for money that you don't even need to make, because you have no experience to make it. You're just asking because somebody said, well, you can make this kind of money. I go back to my grandmother. She'd tell me a lot of things, but you have to go in with the understanding that you should get paid what you're worth based on your experience, but go in and prove yourself also. There's nothing wrong with being able to prove yourself, because if you do, we don't have to say anything. It will be recognized. It will be recognized. So for me, trying to first, I have a great executive team, great people, do a great job. And then, management, and then, all my different teams. I think today is challenging though. I sit on many boards, and the one thing they talk about today is people leaving at lunch and never coming back. What happened to their word? If they say, this is your word. What I tell people all the time, you can leave this company this way, but you look up and that same manager's at a different company, they won't forget. They won't forget. And how you come in is how you go out. It is okay not to be a good match. It is not okay to leave in an emotional state that will burn a bridge for you that you cannot cross back. So it's a tough challenge today, I must say, but for me, I will work through it. I'm sure this too shall pass and it will get better. But if you have a good foundation, when you start building infrastructure, your foundation won't crack so much. And if the winds blow, they will. Hurricanes come. My team tells me it's no such thing as a tsunami, but when those waves come and they're really big and you can see them coming, the best part is all of that structure may fall, but your foundation is there to rebuild again. You can do it over and over again if you have to.
There are many people in this audience, and I'm sure online as well, who have dreams and ideas and all kind of just different things that they want to do. How were you able to hone in on a specific service for your business when you created it?
Well, I'm going to tell you, I had a scholarship to go to law school. And I thought all my life since I was 8, I was going to be an attorney of some sort. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be clear. But I personally did not pick this profession for me. I don't even know if I would have picked me to be an entrepreneur. I can't tell you that. But I can tell you I am in my purpose. And when that purpose showed up, it showed out. So for me, I knew then, I kind of, we help people throughout their course of starting jobs, keeping jobs, being, able to migrate into executive roles. It is very fulfilling. And I kind of feel like I'm in my purpose. I am 50. Okay, I'm not really 58 anymore. I am 59 years old. And for 31, since I was in my 20s, I've owned a company. So it's a long time. And listen, our seasons change too. As we grow up and grow out, I don't mean physically, grow up and grow out, we learn a lot about ourselves. And I can tell you, whatever he chose for me when I was in my 20s would not have been what I chose, but it is the most fulfilling thing I've ever would have wanted for myself. And I can look back and say, for all my family who's listening, they've all been blessed by it, all been blessed by it. So you can't always see what's in front of you, but you got to keep going forward, especially if you're living in your purpose.
Ms. Dean, since I happen to know you and some of your family.
Oh, goodness.
The question I want to ask is, how do you balance, because you have a beautiful, unique story a lot of people don't know. How do you balance being an entrepreneur and family?
Well, that's a good question. When my kids were younger, we had a rule. Everything belonged on the refrigerator. And if it wasn't there, I do mean everything. If it wasn't there, we wouldn't be there. And given the fact that we were blessed to be wherever they were, if it was up there, even the worst, you know, those concerts that you go to and you go, they just can't sing. We were there. And it was difficult sometimes because my kids would have to come to work with us. They'd have to sit and learn, you know, they'd have to understand that. But my unique story, at 35, give or take, maybe a little younger than that, I adopted 2 kids that were ward of the state. And I would have probably told you that wasn't good timing. I was very busy. And I had my daughter and my husband and I, and, you know, we were right in the midst of things. So I will tell you, I was very busy. But somebody asked me to do it that was in an educational setting and said, hey, I've got a wonderful kid, need some help. Can you just take them for a night? The night led to longer, and that led to longer. And then when we went to CPS, the other 2 were there, and we just decided that we were going to try to do whatever we could to help. From that point, they just became a blessing, you know, for me. And they're mine. They're great kids. They're mine. It's been 20-something plus years. They all, it's amazing. Your environment is everything. But they all graduated with honors. They all graduated from college, and they all are doing well. So who you are around is who you become. You know, a lot of us are products of our environment. I am a product of a country town who told you at church to get up and say the welcome, even when you didn't want to. You know, at 5, somebody'd say a welcome and they'd say, baby, get up there and get that response. Some of y'all know what I'm talking about. I played the piano and I couldn't play worth, you know, and they'd say, no, baby, God know you're hot. God know you're hot. And I'd keep playing like I knew what I was doing. Or they would say, you know, we need you to give a welcome for somebody. The reason I can speak today is because they made me get up. They made me be better, you know, and I am a product of that environment. I am a product of a grandmother who said, you can do anything you can think of. If God allows you to think it, he will ensure you will do it. All it is time and space. Keep walking, keep going, keep walking, move forward, and you will get there. So my unique story is I have great kids. I have 3.5. I have my niece, my brother passed away. I have my niece, and we raised, and then my kids, and they're all great kids. They're all doing well, and I'm extremely proud of all of them. My husband and I, we are extremely proud of all of them. So the story is, how do you balance? You learn how to do it every day. Listen, we've got parents. I've got single parents who have 3 and 4 kids, and I wonder how they did it. I mean, I had Mike, and we were both trying to struggle to do it. I wonder how they do it every single day. But to raise good kids is what I tell people all the time when I do workshops about parenting. To raise good kids is to understand they pay attention to everything you do. Nope, it won't be Jay-Z's fault. No, sure won't be Kanye or whatever his name is today, won't be his fault. What they learn from is they learn from us. So when, you know, we don't curse in my house, and I personally don't, but you know, when you explain to somebody that's not what we do in our house, you can't come back with, we don't curse in our house, damn it. That won't work. Lead by. You can't tell somebody, don't do it. I'm doing it, but you shouldn't do it. They pay close attention to how we walk, how we talk, how we sit. And it's really important that in every walk of life, we lead by example. My son got 22 scholarships to go to D1 schools to play football. My daughter got a scholarship to go to college. They all went to D1 schools. They all graduated with honors. And I will tell you, for those of you who are parents today, well, I think I jump out a window, but for those of you who are today, I'm gonna tell you something though. You have to be very close. You don't have to give up and say, oh, that's what everybody else is doing. It's okay for them to do it because everybody else is. You can ask my kids when they were growing up, and it wasn't that long ago because they're not that old, but you know, cell phones came on my dresser at 9 o'clock. because they needed their rest. They didn't take them to the room to be on the phone all night. Friday night was our night. We sat down at the table and we talked about whatever we needed to talk about as a family. Like that was our time. I heard things that I did not want to know, but I'm going to tell you, my son almost, he's so honest, he would just tell you anything. But it was our time. And those values that you put in them now, it will make it. I know you don't think so when they're teenagers because they lose their mind, but when they get to being adults, they're going to lean back into that. And you're going to be extremely proud of them, because I will tell you, you will see all of that show up. So don't give up because it's hard, because anything worth doing is going to be hard. Raising good kids is going to be hard. Do it well though, because all your kids will be our kids someday. And they won't just take care of you, they're going to take care of all of us. Sorry, I got on a little soapbox. I'm off of it now though.
I want to open up the question to the audience. If anybody want to step up and have any questions for Ms. Dean.
While somebody gets prepared, maybe I can ask another question.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, people who consider themselves or who are considering being entrepreneurs, there's the Small Business Administration, there's the Houston Minority Supply Diversity Council.
I'm on.
There's the Black Chamber.
Yes.
What is your advice as it relates to the resources that are available to learn how to be an entrepreneur and how to be a business owner? What advice do you have for
Any type of tool they have available to them, they should use it. I had an SBA. I am a member of NMSDC. I am an advisor for mentoring on there. I am a WBEA. I don't just do it because I'm a minority and they ask you to join them. I do it because I care and I want to see them be successful. But if you have opportunity to learn, you should take advantage of it, period. Somebody was talking about a PhD earlier and I thought, can I go back to school? I'm not sure if I even graduated, but I would say that any education they can get to be better is always good. Always just remember, follow your vision, incorporate what you can so that you can just be better. That's what you have to do. You can't use everybody's tools because they don't belong in your business, but you can incorporate some things into what you do. I have a service business. It's like the air in this room. It's not products that you're tangibly selling. I sell people. And when people show up to work, they're like a jackal in a hide. They're like a whole different being. So it's very different, but any resource is good for you. Be there, be involved, and don't pay your money if you're not going to be involved, because that money could go on the bottom line. Yeah, I'm a stickler for money. So that money could just fall right to the bottom line. So be involved, and thank you for that, because they have helped me a great deal, a great deal. Hello.
My name is Rihanna Anderson. I have a really long title. I work at the University of St. Thomas. I'm the Assistant Director for Community Partnerships at the Center for Faith and Culture. I just have a really simple question, or maybe not so simple, but how did you find your purpose?
I don't know if I found it or it found me, but I think it was when I stopped trying to look at everybody else to be them. It all looks so very attractive when somebody else is doing it. And you go, I want to be just like him. But my uniqueness is I am who I am. And when I started to accept my big nose, my short hair, my, all the little things about me that were divine purpose for me, then I started to accept where my purpose may be. So I think a lot of us are looking at other people trying to develop our purpose, and our purpose walks right past us and say, you're looking the wrong way. I'm right here. I'm right here. Some people think it needs to like slap them over the head and, fall out and, all of that. It doesn't have to be that. Your purpose could be one person in this room may gain something that would have been your purpose. So don't think too long and don't analyze too hard. It keeps coming back to you. And there's this, I call it my gut. The inside says to me, you need to do that. Even when people say, Ms. Dean, you don't need to do that. And my inside says, I call that my God. He says, do that. I lean into that because a lot of times it doesn't feel good on the outside, but it feels really good there. And most of us, I wouldn't have picked this profession for me. I'm not sure what I'd picked, but it probably wouldn't have been this. But I will tell you, you know your purpose when you find your peace. Like that word that my grandmother used to say, baby, it's peace that passes understanding. You will know your purpose when the peace passes understanding. And I don't understand it, but I'm there. There you go. See, he's laughing at me. Anybody else?
Thank you, Ms. Dean. We have a question from the audience, from the online audience, from Tamunonye Cheatham West, who wants to thank you, first of all, for your excellent speech, but has questions about how do you personally find clarity for decision making? What are your practices for making solid decisions? And Cheatham West also wants to know if how you recognize subtle moments of change that don't always look like a global pandemic.
Okay, so the clarity, so I have a couple of things. I'm going to explain it this way. I'm an emotional person, extremely emotional person. So what I've learned is we can't move on emotions because I tend to make a mistake when I do. So I kind of treat it like I do my emails, because I think emails are for confirmation, not conversation. I'll say that again because some people don't get it. I think emails are for confirmation, not conversation. So for me, being an emotional person, what I do is if I have to send one and I'm being emotional, I click it down, I wait a while, I read it again, and I go, girl, you know you're just being emotional. I have to stop. So if with clarity, I have to stop, I have to take a minute. And for me, I pray about it. I wait till some sense of peace comes about it, and then I move on it. So my clarity is I know knowing who I am allows me to understand what my clarity should be. And if I feel like I'm being overly emotional about it, I have to stop for a minute, wait a few days, and decide, should I go that direction? You know, all business isn't good business. And I know this to be a fact. So, and turning down business is very difficult. So, you know, for me, I have to stop, wait, and I have to listen to that voice say, let's move. So my clarity comes from just taking a moment to release my emotions and then go back to it and see if it's working for me. Her second question was, sorry.
The second question was, how do you notice subtle moments for change and opportunity that aren't necessarily easy to see like a global pandemic?
Okay. Yes, the pandemic was a major change. So for me, I think the subtle changes come with understanding my vision for the company. And if I'm in my vision, I understand the subtleness of it is I need to move that direction. Because if we don't learn how to pivot, we just get old doing the same thing over and over again. And that's not about age. That's about doing things over and over again. And listen, you don't have blinking green screens anymore. So you're going to have to change. And I think that's, for me, I think that would be my answer for that. Subtle change for me is, it comes a lot. And I make those subtle changes a lot. But if you have a good foundation and a good vision, you'll know when those changes need to happen. And remember, guys, it's not about you. So sometimes those changes are not going to be things you like, but you have to do them. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you so much for your time and presentation. My question is, I heard you say that you've been married for, I think you said 40 years or
40
so.
years.
So
good googly moogly.
I know, right? For your business, was this a venture that you and your husband started out together on, or did he just come along after the fact? Did you ever work in corporate and then pivot into business, or did you just get out here and start your business?
No, I was about 26, give or take. So no, I worked for a couple of places. I was their social security number. But no, and my husband is a biomed engineer by trade. So he was working. And my attorney, he said, you will be 100% owner always. So I am 100% owner of my companies, all of them, always. And that was just his advice. May not be, it feels kind of emotional when you think about it, especially if you're married, but listen, this is Texas, so he gets half no matter what. He was out for about 14 years. He is an IT guy. So for me, I would have spent a great deal of money. He has learned his profession well. He takes care of our service. He takes care of all of our networks. He takes care of everything. So on that side, I have nothing to worry about. So we stay in our lanes. My daughter works with us also. We stay in our lanes. We do not discuss work at home unless the building's burning down. 8 p.m. is our rule. After that, it's completely over. So we don't get in each other's way unless we ask for it. So when I go in and close the door and say, I've got a problem with, I've asked for it. So whatever I get back is, I'm gonna have to deal with it. So we just, that's kind of our rule of thumb. It is difficult to work with family. People say, I think, you know, my family's my employees, and that's just it. That's how we work. And my daughter is the CEO, really talented young lady, extremely talented. She's smarter than both of us put together, and I'm dumb. I'm not the book. If I had to go back to school, I had to hire somebody to come with me. I'm not that girl. I'm a vision person. I want to learn by looking and doing and feeling and touching. She's just talented to all get out. So you know, she got that from his side of the family. But yes, ma'am, we were not together on that part.
Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to close out this session. I want to begin by thanking Dr. Bird, because when I sat down with him a few months ago and asked what was Rice doing for Juneteenth, he says, I'm not sure yet, but what you thinking, Mike? And so what I would call now is what what this is an example of is the collective competence. And so it's much better than the individual competence. So that means us working together is much greater than us working on our own.
That's right.
And so this is a beautiful thing, us coming together. And I want to thank Alex for that opportunity. And I hope you all enjoy this Juneteenth weekend. And I'm gonna turn it over to Alex now as he walks up.
So I'm just going to thank y'all again for being here. We really appreciate it. It's so good to be back in a place and together. Y'all are always beautiful online over the past 2 years, but this is more beautiful, and it's just been fantastic. I wanna deflect a lot more thanks onto the folks from the Rice Association of Rice Alumni, from the Texas Southern University National Alumni Association, and from the Prairie View A&M National Alumni Association. Michael, Monique, and Tremira were just tremendous thought partners in this. And Mike's vision at the beginning was phenomenal. And I hope this is the beginning of more collaborations like this, but also as has been pointed out in some of the other presentations, collaborations that seep through other aspects of our wonderful universities and the things we care about here in Houston. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Gather and talk in the halls, trade some cards, meet people. Goodbye.